And you're all set.
Great, thank you. Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the Board of Selectmen, Select Board meeting, April 5th, 6:30 p.m. All select board members are present. I call the meeting to order at 6:30. First item of business is public comment. If there's any attendees that would like to speak, please just raise your hand. We'd be happy to bring you over. Okay. I see none at this point, so we will move on to our first item, which is Acting Chief Newell, the appointment of a student police officer. If we could bring the acting chief and Mr. Brown over. Great, thank you. Good evening, Acting Chief Newell. How are you tonight? Thank you for joining us. So if you'd like to take a second and introduce us to Mr. Brown and discuss his appointment a little bit, we would be happy to have a few questions for him potentially.
Sure. Thank you for having me here tonight. It's great to see you all. I'm excited to introduce to you Mr. Riley Brown, who was selected for an open full-time position within our department after the departure of Officer John Vizikis, who transferred from our department to the Westboro Police Department in December of last year. Once this open position opened up, we received 14 applications for the open position. And after a series of interviews, Riley was chosen as the best fit for our department in this community. Riley received his associate's degree from Quinsigamond Community College and his bachelor's degree from Worcester State University, where he graduated with a 4.0 GPA. He is currently attending the MPTC authorized Quinsigamond Community College Police Academy, and where he's joining us from now. He's at the academy right now, with an expected graduation date of May 26th. During Riley's background check, we spoke with many people who have known Riley for most of his life, and all had great things to say about Riley, with the most common description of Riley as being a hard worker, a volunteer, and someone who is eager to learn. I am asking that you appoint Mr. Riley Brown to the position of student officer for the Southborough Police Department. His compensation would be $700 per week per local 167 contract. And once he graduates from the police academy, he would then transition into a probationary officer for the department, where he would immediately begin his 12-week field training program. If anyone has any questions for myself or Riley, we would be happy to answer them for you. And thank you for your time.
Great, thank you so much. Riley, welcome. It's very nice to unofficially meet you, I guess. It's nice to see you. Hopefully we'll meet you in person soon. I don't know, I think Acting Chief Newell did a great job of introducing you. If there's anything you'd like to add to that or introduce yourself to the board, besides what he said, you're certainly welcome to do that. You don't have to do that. I will leave that up to you.
Oh, well, thank you for having me. I just want to say I'm very excited to get started. I've done a lot of research about the town of Southborough. I keep finding good things all around, and I can't wait to help make a difference.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. We'll go round table here. We'll start with Ms. Malinowski.
Thank you. Nice to meet you, Riley. Welcome to the department. I noticed on your resume that you actually did an internship in the fire department. So can you kind of elaborate on what made you choose the police route rather than fire?
So my father was a police officer when I was little, so I was fascinated with all his equipment, and I knew from day one that's what I wanted to do. So in high school, we have a program where your fourth quarter as a senior, instead of going to school every day, you can find a business, or in my case, the fire department. You can go there and be an intern, and that counts as school credit. And that was I was very interested in that. And I tried to do the police department, but they said it was too much of a liability. And they asked if I'd want to do the fire department. And I said, absolutely. It's pretty similar. I get to work with some of the guys and see them on calls and ask a ton of questions. So it was a no-brainer.
Great. Thank you very much. That's all I have, Lisa.
Great. Thank you, Chelsea. Mr. Healy.
Hi, Riley. Nice to meet you. Welcome.
Thank you.
You took me aback a little bit when I looked at your resume and I saw high school class of 2017. Like, God, So I'm sure it doesn't. I'm sure it seems like a while ago to you now, after going through community college and college, where it sounds like you did a great job. Well, this is really got nothing to do with you. I'm just kind of curious, looking at your resume. Where does the QCC Police Academy, is that at the college? Is that where they do it?
Yeah, it's on the campus.
And how many people in a class?
We started with 23. We're down to 12 now.
Okay. And is that, thinking back to officer and a gentleman, is that people leaving on their own request or because they don't hit certain benchmarks? How does that work?
Most of them left under their own power. I think only one was because if you fail 3 tests, you're out. And I think only one person failed 3 tests.
Okay. Well, great. Well, again, very impressive record, and look forward to having you in Southborough.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Mr. Stivers.
Thank you. Good to meet you, Riley, and thank you for applying for this position. We think we've got a great department, and it sounds like you'll be a great addition to that. Very impressive bio. I don't have any questions at this point, so I'm all set. And again, thank you for being willing to join the force here. It looks like a great fit.
Thank you.
All right, Mr. Dennington.
And Mr. Brown, I don't have any questions for you, but just wanted to express my appreciation for your enthusiasm and look forward to you joining us.
Thank you, sir.
Great, thank you. And Riley, the only thing I'll add is I was really impressed when I saw that you were a security team member at Polar Park. And one of the things was you de-escalated antisocial behaviors. And
Yes.
I think, that's kind of important in what you do. So I actually found that very interesting as I went through your resume as well. So I hope you appreciate Southborough as much as we do. We will certainly appreciate you being here. That being said, does the board have any questions for Acting Chief Newell regarding this? Are we ready to make a motion? I see no questions. Great. Do we have a motion to appoint to student police officer Riley Brown at a pay rate of $700 per week?
So move.
Is there a second?
Second?
Thank you. Roll call. Ms. Melanowski,
Aye.
Mr. Healy,
Aye.
Mr. Stivers,
Aye.
Mr. Dennington,
Aye.
and Ms. Brascio. Aye. Thank you so much, Riley. Thank you, Acting Chief Newell, for coming as well. You enjoy the rest of your night. And good luck as
Thank
you
you.
finish the academy.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Could I just add
Thank
one
you.
more thing?
Absolutely.
Riley is scheduled to be sworn in tomorrow for his appointment, after his appointment tonight. So we're excited about that, to get him going and to get him started. Also, there were just 2 corrections that needed to be made for his letter of recommendation. He has informed me that his graduation date has changed. And it is now the 26th instead of the 27th that was on the form. And also his effective date would obviously be tonight and not the 4th that was listed. So I just want to make sure that was updated.
Great. Thank you so much. Much appreciated.
All right, thank you.
Thank you for joining us.
you.
I'm actually going to move up from under consent, the appointment of the senior IT specialist. If we could bring, I see Mr. Montijo is here and Mr. Dahlberg. So if we could just bring them over.
Am I all set at this point?
Yes, Riley, I'm sorry, you're all set.
Awesome.
Thank you so much.
Take care.
Sorry about that.
Thank you.
Hi, good evening, Mr. Dahlberg. Good evening, Jay. Welcome. Jay, kind of the same thing. Why don't you give us a little bit of an intro on Mr. Dahlberg so we can welcome him and ask a few questions.
Yeah, so just making sure everybody can hear me okay. Okay, Bill Dahlberg is coming from Boston College, has been there for a combination of about 10 years. He has a really good resume as far as working with technology, all different types of technology, which is really good considering what we do. And is definitely looking forward to being out of a silo at Boston College and working with multiple different layers of technology. So I had a couple of recommendation calls, referrals from him to call, and great recommendations from his friends and colleagues. And a couple of things I heard is that he's really good with cars on top of it. So maybe I might want to call him to work on my car. So I will let you guys go ahead and ask anything else of Bill.
Great. Thank you so much. Good evening, Mr. Wahlberg. Welcome. Dahlberg. Sorry about that. Welcome. Do you want to add anything to what Jay said as maybe a little bit of an introduction to yourself? You're certainly welcome to. You don't have to do that.
Sure, I would. Thank you. Yeah, so as Jay mentioned, I've been at BC for about 10 years. I've been very comfortable there. I've kind of, in the role I'm at, and I'm looking to expand my skills and grow them. And it sounds like I'm going to have a lot to learn at Southborough with Jay, and I'm very much looking forward to that.
Wonderful, sir. Thank you so much. We'll start with Mr. Healy.
Yeah, welcome, Mr. Dahlberg. Nice to meet you. Whoops, no, Jason just disappeared. All right. How big an IT, I'm assuming it's pretty sizable. How big an IT operation is Boston College?
I think we're around 250 people.
Wow.
Yeah, it's
wow. So where in the spectrum of 250 did you fall? Probably somewhat squarely in the middle, or did you move your way up as you were there for a while?
So I actually started as a contractor. I wasn't even an official employee at BC. I was a temp for about 6 months. And then after that, I started full-time in the help center, which is the bottom of the barrel. That's kind of where everything flows into IT. And I worked my way up to a technology consultant, which is my current role. And I'd say that's kind of in the low middle range of the 250.
Okay, so that's even more of a sizable organization than I thought it was going to be.
Yes.
Have you thought about and talked with Jay about transitioning from an IT operation that's large to one where, boy, oh boy, you're going to be a jack of all trades and have to carry an awful lot of different responsibilities? And your thoughts on that?
Yeah, no, we discussed that extensively, and I think that was one of my main attractions for coming to Southborough is that, in an organization as large as the one I'm in, I am very siloed. We have to stay in our lane, and we escalate things to other groups that handle other matters. And in this role, it seems like I'm going to be doing pretty much anything and everything, and that's very exciting to me. I can't get to wait get my hands on all these new technologies.
All right, great. Actually, that's a good perspective to have too. So, welcome, and let's see who else has some questions and welcomes for you.
All right, thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Stivers.
Thank you. Good to meet you, Mr. Dahlberg. And again, thanks for applying for this position. We think that's a pretty exciting opportunity. One of the things I was interested in, as Jay, I'm sure, has told you, one of the things that he's been working on is beefing up our cybersecurity protection from a variety of potential external threats. And I think we've made some good progress there. What kind of background do you have in that specifically? Did you get involved in that to any degree at BC?
Not specifically. We have a specific cybersecurity group at BC, but in terms of user support, on the ground level, I was very involved in day-to-day, user training, making sure people were aware of best practices, updating and maintaining antivirus on client machines. So I've been at it at the ground level, and obviously it's something that's very important, and I'm looking forward to learning more about it with Jay. But that's something that's definitely on the forefront of my mind. It makes me nervous. I think as it probably should everybody.
Yeah, that's good. And again, not that there's not plenty of work to do at the individual user level in town. As you well know, you got constant vigilance is important there, and reinforcement of work habits and patterns and training and so forth. With that, there's a great deterrent. So also, though, at the system level, I think there are a number of things that we are going to wind up doing over the foreseeable future here that sounds like you're a good fit to get involved in that as well. So that's my question. Thanks very much and welcome.
Thank you very much.
Mr. Dennington.
Good evening, Mr. Dahlberg. I don't have any questions for you at the moment, but just wanted to thank you. And also, I'm really excited about your joining the team. And, we have learned over the last couple of years the importance of investing in IT. And so we're interested in partnering with you and Jay and working to use our resources that we can better communicate with the public, stay organized, and also protect our cyber assets. Thanks.
Thank you.
Ms. Malinowski.
Thank you. Hi, Mr. Dahlberg. Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you.
Thank you for applying for this position. We're very excited to have you come forward. Can you give us a little bit of background on what attracted you to this position outside of, kind of widening your responsibilities? I mean, obviously this is public sector, which is quite different than what you're coming from. So can you elaborate on a little bit more of what attracted you to apply for this?
Absolutely. So obviously the public sector is totally new to me. Most of my experience was spent in higher education, but I did have a brief stint in the private sector. And I think having that experience kind of made me realize, what direction I want to take my career in, who I'd like to work with, the type of community feel that, I did have in higher ed. And I got that from Jay and, meeting Vanessa and Mark and Brian. I got a really good community feel from Southborough. And that's the type of environment I want to work in. And I think that's really what attracted me as well to the position in addition to the career opportunities.
Great. Thank you very much and welcome.
Thank you.
Great, thank you. And I will just say, we're really looking forward to bringing you on. Jay's carried a lot on his plate for a very long time. And I can see a little bit of relief on his face tonight as we're having this discussion. But I will just take this opportunity to also say, Jay, that we appreciate everything you've done as well. And we're really happy to be able to get you some of the help that you've been talking about since you came here. So Mr. Dahlberg, welcome. It is an absolute pleasure to bring you on board. And that being said, do we have a motion to appoint IT specialist William Dahlberg with a start date of 5/4/22 at a salary of $82,000?
So move.
Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you. Roll call. Ms. Malinowski. Mr. Healy.
Aye.
Mr. Stivers.
Aye.
Mr. Dennington.
Aye.
And Ms. Braccio, aye. Welcome on board. It's a pleasure. We look forward to seeing you on May 4th. I'm sure Jay does as well. Jay, thank
very
you.
much.
I know you had plans tonight, so thank you for definitely jumping on. Much appreciated to both of you. Enjoy the rest of your night.
You too.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Next up is Linda Borneval, and I hope I'm saying this correctly. If we could bring her over for the OPEB audit. And I think Brian's there too. Vanessa, can we bring Brian over as well? Good evening, Linda. I hope I didn't butcher your last name too much.
You said it beautifully. You must have some French Canadian in you or
Oh.
something like that.
I wanted to make it sound as exotic as it looked.
Yeah,
So
sounds great. My family would be proud.
wonderful. Well, welcome. Thank you for coming. I will turn it over to you if you'd like to go through the process that you went through regarding the OPEB and where we stand. The floor is yours. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much. And maybe I'll push this off to Brian. Am I going to be controlling the deck or Brian, are you?
That is totally up to you. If you're okay with doing it, I'll leave it up to you.
I can multitask, right?
Okay, awesome. Here we go. Look at that.
Do we see a PowerPoint presentation? So let's get the slideshow going from the beginning. How's that? Let's get rid of this
Perfect.
dumb little thing here. I don't want to give subtitles a try. There we go. All right. So thank you very much for having me. So you guys are quite brave. The CPA auditor and the actuary in the same night. So this will be an interesting evening. As you know, we're probably both kind of on a lot of numbers here, but we try not to, we don't want your eyes glazing over by the end of the presentation. I do speak pretty quickly. I am okay if you, Madam Chair, are okay with interruptions as we go. Sometimes if I say something, to have to wait for me to get to the end and then you say, oh, what question did I have? It might be better context wise if you interrupt me, and that would be perfectly fine. So
that's fine. And we'll allow, any board members, if you want to wait till the end, that's fine. But if there's something specific, the board can certainly jump in at any time.
Great. Okay. So our quick agenda, we're really just going to talk about what is it we do? What does an actuary do for a town like Southborough in terms of their OPEB? We'll talk about what OPEB even means. Talk about your results specifically. How do we kind of, cook the valuation with all the ingredients that we need to kind of throw in the pot and get some results. What are we doing with these results? You know, what are you doing with them, and why do they mean anything? So those are the highlights of kind of the prepared remarks here today. By quick introduction, Linda Bourneville, fellow of the Society of Actuaries. I'm an enrolled actuary. That just means that the Department of Treasury recognizes me as an actuary, really for private sector kind of plans, not public. I'm a member of the American Academy of Actuaries. That's what should be important to you all. That means we have a code of conduct. We are a self-regulated profession. So we all basically have a say in how our profession does our work. And really it's so that the public can be kind of comforted by these sets of guidelines and code of conduct that we follow. And that, you know, technically any actuary who is a member of the American Academy, we are bound to those standards. And also a fellow of the Conference of Consulting Actuaries. My experience is I've done a ton of this retiree medical work. This is what OPEB is. It's retiree medical, you know, benefits provided, healthcare type things to your retirees. By my, I guess, original experience really is in the public pension realm. We are also the actuaries for Worcester Regional Retirement System, which you guys are a contributing member of. So that kind of gives us a nice, you know, understanding of what those commitments by you, you know, are for Worcester Regional as well as OPEB. I mean, they really are kind of related. So it's kind of nice to be able to, you know, have that understanding on what it is you're all kind of under the gun for retirement. We also do actuarial audits of pension systems outside of New England. And lately, the stylish thing to talk about and to work on pension obligation bonds, where some communities in Massachusetts have actually bonded their retirement obligations by dumping in a whole lot of money into the retirement fund and paying them off as a bond. We've done some work on 2 out of the 3 of them actually who just issued some bonds. So that's who I am. So again, so what do? We prepare an evaluation, and that just means we're going to collect some information from Brian regarding your members, your employees, your retirees, your health insurance information. You do have some assets set aside in an OPEB trust, so we're going to be looking at that. We need to make some assumptions about the future. You know, we are kind of fortune tellers here. We need to figure out when is somebody going to retire? How long are they going to retire for? You know, what kind of plan or health insurance coverage are they going to elect, and all those kinds of things. We can, from all of that information, develop some contribution models for funding to the OPEB trust. And of course, you know, the real reason that we get hired is the auditors require for your financial statements certain disclosures of these liabilities. So that's really, like, you know, I put it last here, but it's really the most important reason that we prepare these valuations. So these are the key results. We have a report. Brian might maybe nod his head or say, is that on your website or distributed? You know, it's a public report, so it's available. This is, you know, 1 page of the 30-something page report that's really just summarizing where you are at. We have a liability. We have assets to kind of fund some of those liabilities. So right now our liabilities are almost about $50 million, and we have about 2.7 million set aside. Don't fret. Don't say, oh my gosh, we're 5% funded, 5.5% funded. You really are in kind of the same boat that everybody in the Commonwealth is in, save for a few exceptions. And there's also, by the way, on the PERAC, it's the Public Employees Retirement Administration Commission website, it's a mass agency. They actually compile information on every city and town in Massachusetts on this very page. Basically, these results, if they had gotten your 2021 results in time for their distribution of the report, would be in there. They actually have the beginning balance stuff for you guys in their report. So you can kind of play around. They have an interactive website where you can type in any community you want to. There's a PDF of the report with every city and town listed in alphabetical order. You can kind of see, what are they setting aside for assets? What does their liability look like? And where do we land in there? So a lot of people kind of want to ask that question, like, how do we compare? And that report, provides some pretty good information. What the report doesn't have, though, there's so many assumptions that go into these numbers. You really have to drill down and see a full actuarial valuation report side by side to understand truly why there is a difference. There could be a community who offers the exact same healthcare plans that require their retirees to pay the exact same contribution amounts. And one could have a liability of 50 million and the other could have a liability of 25 million. And you would say, why, how can that be? And we'll get into that on why there's so many different reasons why results are different. And by the way, I get these questions all the time from, auditors will ask me, I have two clients, I have two different actuaries, and how come this one has, this for liabilities and this one has that? And I say, well, if you show me the reports, I can kind of point out, the reasons why something might be different. This is just a short little historical chart on kind of where you've been. GASB 75 or 74 and 75 was effective for the 17 fiscal year. Because it was effective in 17, you kind of got to start at 16 to get you a beginning number. But this kind of gives you a little picture of how things are progressing. Again, they're so immature, these programs, in terms of funding, that you can barely see where your assets are. Honestly, they are the little green shaded thing in the middle, right? So, and then the darker green, that's sort of how your liabilities are changing over time. The bond rates, we'll talk about that, on what that means, are really wreaking havoc on these liabilities, because the rates are in a few of the years were wildly changing year over year. And so that is going to get you that kind of crazy green bar going all over the place. And then assumption changes and just all kinds of things, again, play into the green bar. The pale green are your assets that you've set aside, where you kind of control what you're going to put into those assets, what kind of investment policy you're going to have on how you want to invest those assets, meaning a 60-40 equity fixed income portfolio type thing. This is kind of one of the few, besides retirement funds, that a public entity can actually get some meaningful returns. It's not a general fund where you just have to kind of park it in cash or something very safe. You actually can have, there's an exception in the Commonwealth's statute, you can invest these funds because they're long-term, right? Some of these things, like you got a 22-year-old in this valuation who isn't going to retire for 40 years, and you might not even need the assets for 45 years. You want to make some money over that period of time. And so that's the point of the pre-funding. And we'll talk a little bit more about that on pre-funding, and pluses and minuses, why you want to do it. So an OPEB trust, you have established a trust, you've opened an account, you accumulate assets, whether you have a formal policy or you don't have a formal policy. There is nobody like PERAC or the Commonwealth telling you to fund. This is strictly left to local choices and local control. So it is really up to Southborough to decide if they want to accumulate assets in a fund, and whether or not they will, how much they're going to invest, where they're going to invest it. All those things are left to you. There is no current statute in Massachusetts. Actually, there are very few throughout the country that require OPEB. Unlike pensions, Chapter 32, right, requires funding of your pension. They must be fully funded by 2040. Very strict funding rules under pension. None of that exists under OPEB. By the way, I forgot to define OPEB. The reason they call it OPEB is the acronym for Other Post-Employment Benefits Other Than Pensions. That's what the other means. Kind of a goofy, whoever came up with that title was not truly creative. but the other, it just means it's not a pension benefit. It's not that benefit that Worcester Regional or Mass Teachers Retirement requires. The 2.5% of a final pay times years of service. This is not that. This is health insurance, dental if you offered it, life insurance to retirees. Okay, so that's really what we're looking at here in terms of what it is. What's this benefit? Once you accept or adopt a trust, GASB says, in order for you to recognize that trust, we're not going to kind of give you just a pass. Oh yeah, let's open a checking account down at Southborough Savings Bank, if there's such a thing as that, right? They just really are saying there are some criteria here in order for the auditors to accept that trust and to actually recognize it. So the 3 trust criteria is that 1, the assets that you are accumulating are used to provide these benefits, OPEB, to your retirees. That's it. You can't build a school with it. You can't, hire a junior police kid. That you cannot do anything like that. It has to be for providing these OPEB benefits. The assets are legally protected from creditors. And once those contributions go in, they cannot come out, right? They can come out for the purpose of providing the benefits to your retirees. Now, keep in mind, you have a trust, but you are already providing benefits to retirees. You're already paying out 60% of the healthcare premiums that are due on behalf of your retirees. So you do provide benefits. You just probably don't take them out of the trust. When you're 5.5% funded, if you're going to start drawing from the trust, you'll soon be 0% funded, I guarantee you. So you're kind of working on that project of trying to get closer to a better funded status. Okay, so we talked a little bit about funding policy. Some entities create a funding policy that's based on the percentage of free cash or their proceeds from a cell tower that they rent or the meals tax they may collect. Others say, like you guys do, we're going to contribute this fixed dollar amount, maybe until some other things in our budget free up. And here's one of the big things that's going to free up, at least that we think of right now. In 2036, Worcester Regional is expected to be fully funded, right? So what that means is there's a few different components of the Worcester Regional appropriation that you guys get annually billed for. You're paying some administrative expenses to keep that system running. You pay off this unfunded liability that is a huge nut. And then you're also paying the cost of benefits earned in the year. The first and the third things are not going to go away ever. So fully funded doesn't mean Worcester Regional's bill will become a 0. It means we're done working on the unfunded portion of that system, right? There's going to be a lot of cash that's going to be freed up from those appropriations because that is a huge part of the annual appropriation for Worcester Regional. Many entities are doing this. They're saying, Linda, I'm in, Norfolk County, and we're not the actuaries, but I can look it up. I can say, oh, Norfolk County is going to be fully funded in this certain day. What's your part of that appropriation? Oh, it's 2%. Okay, well, here's 2% of this total. I can do the math and say, you might release $9 million back, out in 2036. So you can then divert some of those funds that you were putting toward retirement toward this OPEB. Again, not required because, again, no statute requires OPEB trust funding. But it's something that people are thinking about because it's something they know is going to occur once the system is fully funded. That's if the legislature, by the way, doesn't change the rules on how to fund these retirement systems. Right now, it is 2040 that you've got to be funded by. Okay, so again, don't feel too badly that, geez, we're only 5.5% funded. It really, I have never really calculated the average, but it's not much different probably than that. There's some entities that are pretty well funded. I just looked it up. The Commonwealth's like 2.8% funded. So again, people are working on retirement really because it's required, right? They're not really, I mean, some are focused on OPEB, but when you have a statute requiring funding, you gotta put that one as a, higher priority. Okay. What do we do? What do actuaries do? One of my colleagues said we are, we're sort of forecasters, or we do actuarial voodoo, not a, great description, but it's really, I don't want to say it's simple, but it's kind of logical when you think about what we do. Brian provides to us information on all of your employees and retirees, right? What kind of things? For a retiree, how old are they? What plan do they have covered by? Are they male or female? Are they on a Medicare plan, or are they on a pre-med plan? Do they have a spouse that's covered? Everything about them, right, that we need to know. Also on employees, again, are they male or female? When were they hired? Because that's an important piece on when do we think they're going to retire. How old are they, right? Got to be 65 probably, or at least 55 if you're a general group 1 employee to retire. So we need to make predictions on when we think all these future retirees are going to kind of land in the pay status of getting a healthcare benefit. Then the town provides us with what it is do you offer? Do you offer health insurance? The answer is yes. Dental? Well, do you pay a portion of the dental, or does the retiree pay for it all? Do you offer a life insurance policy to retirees? All those things usually are never in a nice document. They're all over the place, and we know that, and the GASB knows that. So what they have defined is this thing called the substantive plan. That just means, what do your retirees understand their benefits to be? That's it. All right, so here's the plan, here's what they do, here's what they pay, here's what you pay. We take that. Then we have to select a whole bunch of assumptions, because we need to figure out how all, the future looks. What kind of benefits are you going to be paying out into the future? When will people retire? How do health insurance premium rates change over time? What's inflation looking like in the future, 20, 30, 50 years from now? All kinds of things. A very important assumption, how long do we think people are going to live? Because you're going to be paying this health insurance coverage, 60% of it, until death. How long will their spouses live? Who's got a spouse? Who doesn't have a spouse? All those things, we kind of put it in the bowl, we mix it all up, we throw it in the oven, we push a few buttons, and out come a whole lot of results that we then use to create all of your funding and accounting disclosures. Plan provisions, I won't go over all these. They're in our report that we detail, but this is kind of like the summary. We have some Medicare eligible retirees and spouses who, by the way, their plans are a lot less expensive, the ones that the town provides, because Medicare becomes primary. That's key. You want to get your retirees, if they are eligible, onto the Medicare eligible plans. Very important, because otherwise they are very expensive to keep on, like PPOs or HMOs when they're in their 70s or 80s. Kind of right now, the statute does require you to put them on there. I believe the statute even goes as far as saying if they don't prove to you they're not eligible, you can push them off. Usually they'll come in with we're not eligible, I didn't have my covered quarters, so then you kind of have to hold on to them in the what we call early retiree or active plans. Little life insurance policy that's provided to retirees. As you could probably imagine, it is literally a drop in the bucket on this liability, because the health insurance component is so much more expensive. It's all of 36 cents a month, I think. 17.5 cents, is that right? Yeah, right. 17.5 cents, kind of weird, but it is. You also offer dental insurance to retirees, and that's split between the town and retirees is 50-50. The assumptions I've listed here, the most important ones, there's an economic assumption that we have to, once we project all of those benefits to the future, we've got to discount them back to the future, back to the present. I mentioned something about the bond rate. The bond rate is for really anyone who has no assets and no funding policy and nothing. The GASB kind of believes that you have borrowed this liability So they say then discount it at a municipal bond rate. Right now, at least when we did this valuation back in June, the bond rate, municipal bond rate was 2.16%. Liabilities discounted at that rate can become very large very fast. Then we have assets set aside that we think are going to earn 6.65 on average every year forever. You guys have a pretty nice funding policy. We look at what you've got set aside and we call what you get to discount at a blended rate. You're kind of in between using that full bond rate and the full long-term rate of return. The more assets you accumulate and the more robust your funding policy is, the closer you will be to long-term rate of return. That's a goal that is a good goal to have, is to kind of get to the point of being able to get you closer to a long-term rate of return. Healthcare trend rates, actuaries spend lots of time developing these models on how they believe healthcare is going to increase into the future. And it's a model called the Getson. There is a man, really, I think his name is Stephen Getson, who developed this trend rate. We use that model. I mentioned already, mortality rates, hugely important because we need to know how long people are going to get these benefits. Talk about participation. Are you going to be in the plan, not in the plan? You're going to cover a spouse, all of those things, all disclosed in our report. Section 6 has probably about 10 pages of disclosures of all the assumptions that we use. As I mentioned, the most important kind of component of the output of our work is that your OPEB liability, the liability minus what you've set aside in assets, goes on your balance sheet. That all happened back in 2018. Pretty much probably that put everyone in the red. So right now, like I said, you have about $47 million of an unfunded liability. Pensions, you get the same thing, by the way. So by the time you add pensions in OPEB, that puts you kind of, out of the black. Also financial statement calculations will calculate an expense for you for this OPEB program, and it's close to about a $4 million expense in 2021. And all this other stuff, it's all of the disclosures are detailed in our report that kind of get you from one year to the other. As I mentioned, there's all kinds of reasons why the liabilities, experience gains and losses, nobody's dying, everyone's living. So if there's a loss, right, because they're still here when we anticipated somebody might die, we might change an assumption. We might say we think people are living longer than what we assumed before. So we've got to make that assumption change. That ups the liabilities. Or conversely, there may be we might say, we don't think 85% of your retirees are actually electing coverage. We might think maybe it's 80 based on some experience that we're looking at. That would actually reduce your liability. So there's all kinds of things we're looking at that have impact on the results that we're getting. And obviously the assets, right? We think they're going to earn 665. Maybe in June 2021, that was not the case. I think we had close to 30% return, by the way, in most OPEB funds in 2021. So that was good news. That was the only good news that we get to provide this year, because usually everything else that actuaries present is not good news. Just so you know, there's our report, kind of just let you know, you can knock on Brian's door and I'm sure he has it. The GASB is our sort of cookbook persons who kind of tell us how to do all of this and disclose and provide the auditors with the information that they need to properly put all of this stuff in your financial statements. We do work closely with many auditors. They want your census data from us. They want to kind of prove that Brian gave us like the right stuff. They have questions on how come this went this way and that went that way. And we work with them to kind of try to explain, just like I'm not an auditor and I have no idea what those people do. They probably have little idea of what exactly we do. And that is my prepared remarks.
Great. Thank you so much. That was pretty comprehensive. Brian, did you want to add anything to that before I open it up to the board?
No, I'll just make a quick comment that Linda and actually Tony, who's coming up right after Linda, are both first-time auditors here and actuarial people. So for various reasons, this is the first year for both. So I just wanted to mention that.
Great. Thank you, Brian. So thank you for this. It was pretty comprehensive. It was a great report. I did go and look before I open this up to the board. I just want to say I did go and look at what other towns and where other towns are at on the PDF. And I was actually kind of surprised that some of the liabilities that are out there that aren't being funded at all at this point. They're at 0%. So I was a little bit shocked at that. So Mr. Stivers, we'll start with you.
Okay. Thanks. And thanks, Linda. Very comprehensive. Couple of questions. Maybe this is for Brian. Who's actually managing our OPEB trust assets these days?
We have an investment firm that's pretty common in the municipal area. It's Bartholomew and Sons Investment, and they actually handle our trust fund too, and the CPC, Community Preservation Act funds.
And do we actually vote as a select board on the investment strategy in terms of asset mix kind of things? I don't actually recall doing that. Maybe I missed that one.
No, when we first opened them, probably, God, I don't want to age myself, but probably 20 years ago, we sat down with them and went through an investment split, like Linda mentioned, like 60-40. And then annually we'll meet again. It's usually just internal people. And we just go over the results and if there's any concerns or, where we want to go for the new year. Okay, interesting. I was struck by the 29% return in the most recent year. That's a wonderful, wonderful result. Clearly hard to replicate, but a question for Linda. In that kind of a world, our borrowing rate is remarkably low these days. Why don't more towns actually borrow and bond this liability? And I got to believe that equity markets are going to return far more than 2 or 3% in terms of investment returns over the next 20 years. So that would seem to me to be a pretty interesting strategy for people to pursue.
Yeah, great.
Can't do that.
Great question. As I said earlier in my remarks, A&F allows pension obligation bonds in the Commonwealth. I've heard they do not allow OPEB obligation bonds. Pretty strict. Got to go through a lot, even on these pension obligation bonds. I mean, we're talking, the couple I've worked on, $360 million in issue. One was 175 million. I'm working on one that might be 750 million.
Okay.
It's a lot of money.
Right.
Right.
I must have misheard then. I thought I heard you say that some towns are bonding the OPEB liability. So
I don't think I've heard of any in Massachusetts. And I just heard actually like a week ago that they said the Commonwealth was not allowing that. Now I've never seen that, officially, but I kind of heard it in passing.
I'm not suggesting that we should be the first, but it's an interesting strategy if you could basically arbitrage, which is a good strategy sometimes. Follow up on one of your comments. I actually did download the PURAC spreadsheet thing, and we're at number 117 out of almost 300 towns in terms of the funding percentage. So we are a little above the midpoint there, and clearly there are a lot of towns that are doing far worse than we are. I had a couple of questions about your inflation assumptions. Again, the 2.2% inflation assumption seems to be awfully conservative given the current outlook for overall inflation, and the medical cost inflation at the 7% and dropping by 0.4 a year. I'm actually in the healthcare business, and I certainly don't see that kind of a drop in healthcare costs over the long term. So is that not something that could actually send that liability up substantially if you're underestimating on the inflation and overestimating on the progress in terms of medical cost reductions?
Yeah, let me take the second question first on the healthcare trend rates. So as I mentioned, it's a model that takes into account inflation, utilization, technology changes, all of that kind of stuff for the short-term rate. So this year, I have to say, we've not seen even the 7% increases. I mean, that was, we kind of have just brought that down from 8.5. Our short-term changes are definitely going down. The issue with the tail end and we get to that ultimate rate, I think in 2075. If we kept that too high, it would take over GDP, right? So healthcare and prescription drugs would be all. We have nothing else. So the model has to sort of have this sort of macro review of it, that it doesn't, get there too quickly and stay up there too high.
Yep.
So that is actually the most difficult piece of our assumptions. Somebody who retires or doesn't retire at 55, maybe they retire at 56, that's not really hugely impactful, but we really struggle with, we never match, we never hit the health trend, perfectly. But in the long term, like, we've got to settle it, right? We've got to kind of get that at a 4% ultimate. That's pretty common. That 4% ultimate, you've got part of it is inflation. Again, part of it is some other medical technology changes that might occur and other stuff. So with that said, inflation. All right, we're getting beaten up so badly right now because, inflation right now, right, is very different than our long-term outlook. And remember, this is a long-term outlook. Inflation, I want to say, like a couple of years ago, on the long-term idea of it, was in the threes, right? And actuaries have kind of continually chiseled that thing down. The Social Security report, actually, their intermediate assumption is 2.4. Now, their reports have been late this year. It's not out yet. It used to come out in like February, March timeframe. Last year, it came out in April. And it was still, I don't think it went down any. Maybe it stayed at around either 2.4 or 2.3. So they're still kind of thinking, long term, still in the kind of mid to low 2. Sorry.
Yeah. Clearly hard.
Just like you might say the 2021 market returns were just awesome. So why are we, thinking that we're going to have a 6.65% overall return on our, it really, we look at historical for some perspective, but we don't really use historical for our future forward-looking assumption.
Yeah. Again, hard to predict, certainly. And I'm interested in that one simply because the math makes it pretty sensitive to those particular assumptions. I guess my bottom line on this whole thing is sort of like the pension liability, in the sense that it looks fairly grim now in terms of the numbers, but I think on the pension side, the adjustment that's going to come in the mid 2030s looks like it's all going to work. And my sense on this one is that adjustment plus the long-term view suggests that even though we're at 5.5% funded or whatever now, my instinct says that we'll probably be okay without having to upset the apple cart and scrounge and find extra dollars to throw in this one. Do you have any different view of that one? I'm not inclined to lose a lot of sleep over this at this point. But
yeah, and I mentioned that, the idea of once pension gets fully funded, can we divert some funds over there? The whole theory is sort of the same as it was with pension, 40 years ago, that if we showed you not in numbers in a table, but in a chart on what we think these benefit payments out of OPEB are looking like, which is, if you can see my hand, it isn't flat, it's going up. It's the same kind of concept, right? That if I pre-fund while my employee is working, I'm hoping that I will fund the nest egg needed to fund that benefit, to pay that benefit once he's retired. Right. I mean, and that's sort of the accrual accounting methodology that we're using here, that we're accruing. I mean, we're accruing this expense as we go, but we're not really funding it. So that's the difference.
Final quick question. I saw the mortality tables you used are pretty dated now. Any impact from the pandemic in terms of mortality that's going to make any significant impact on your projections?
Good question. I don't know that our reports dated our assumptions.
2018, 2017, 2010, I saw in there.
Well, yeah, it takes about 10 years to do a mortality study. And interestingly, when they name the table, it's usually named in the year that they're doing the work, as opposed to all of the data, which is probably 10 years old, that they're using.
Yeah.
So one of the things that we do have on our mortality tables, it's not just the rate of mortality. Nowadays, people don't talk in terms of if I'm 65, I have an X% probability of living or dying. It's now if I'm a 65-year-old who was, born in some certain year, I have a different mortality than the 65-year-old 5 years from now born in a different year. Right. So we have mortality improvement built in that theoretically the folks who are 65 right now will have a different mortality pattern for the rest of their lives than the 25-year-old once he's 65.
Right. But the
If
people
that
who are
makes sense.
65 now, again, have a higher risk of death from the pandemic to some degree. Maybe that's infinitesimally small. I don't know. But that seems to me to be an interesting factor. And maybe, again, it's insignificant. But
Yeah, we haven't, it's funny. So, well, not funny, but there's been still in just a couple years, there's still a lot of studying and trying to figure out, is it the experience will modify, it's going to modify in the short term, but is it going to impact our future expectations of longevity? And that I think has still not been determined. So we kind of comment that, did the pandemic hit the retirees of Worcester Regional? I'm saying Worcester Regional because it's a much larger system and it will be more impactful. We don't do retirement or mortality studies for just the town of Southborough. It's too small.
Yep.
Right. So, so will the pandemic modify those assumptions, or is it just going to kind of have a blip in the current experience, right? That we don't know yet. We don't know what that experience is yet until we get some more data from Worcester Regional and say, oh, gee, we only expected 200 retiree deaths, but we got 400.
Yeah.
That might be the time to say, change the assumption.
Not a huge issue. That's it for me for questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr.
welcome.
Dennington.
Hi, Linda. Thank you very much. So I guess my kind of bottom line takeaway is, as a select board member, I see this report as helping to help us make a judgment about whether we should increase or decrease or stay the same our annual contribution to the OPEB trust fund. I don't know if you see it the same way of this is one of the purposes of this. And for me, I also looked at the comparison of other towns, and I also looked at some of the peer communities just geographically around us, and we're kind of in the same ballpark as a lot of them, but I'm looking at the funded ratio, I think is the correct term. We're a little bit lower than some of our other peer communities. I mean, I think we've made very good progress, but I guess for me, the takeaway is it's not really a fiscal 2023 decision, but fiscal year 2024, things we might consider in the next fall of this year would be to possibly increasing the contribution from the 250 up. And to that point, I had a question for Brian and Mark. So when we talk about we have a policy, we contribute 250 annually. Is that like just kind of an informal policy or a written down policy in a bylaw? Do you know?
It was an informal one, Andrew.
Okay.
Started a number of years ago, and I hate to say 250 was a nice round number, but it fit into that first year budget. We kind of, we managed to keep it so that it was a foundation for every year. We kind of built it into the budget. It was actually built into the benefits budget, and it kind of baked in there. So that's kind of how we got the town used to it.
Yeah, I mean, it would be difficult to offset, to make up for it with cuts elsewhere. It really would be, we would need to make a commitment. We're going to appropriate more to donate to the OPEB trust fund to hopefully avoid problems down the road. And so I'm open to that idea. Again, it's really more of a fall 2022 type of discussion, but what do you think of that, Linda? I mean, the bottom line is, I think, should we increase the amount, decrease the amount? What is your view?
It's kind of, so step back and kind of think about it like if you were funding your 401k, right? A lot of people say, well, when you're 20, you just say, I only want to give you 10% of my salary or 5% of my salary or 3%, right? You sort of think of it in terms of like, what am I willing to give up today? But as you get closer to retirement, you kind of start scratching your head and say, I think I'd like to accumulate $1 million, right? Or so it's kind of the same idea. You kind of want a roadmap of what is it you want. Some communities say, we want to be 100% funded in 30 years. Linda, how do we get there? I said, okay, so we'll start at 250. Do you want to does your budget increase by 2% a year? Would you like to see an increasing contribution into that? And we can tell you with these results that a 30-year amortization would require, X many dollars to start and increasing by whatever to get there. So there's sort of a little bit of that discussion on, is 100% funded at some particular date desirable? Right? Is it important? There's going to be a point that you want to start letting this trust work for you, right? That you aren't going to send money to the trust and also write out the checks to the insurance providers, right? For the 60% portion of the town's contribution. You want the trust to be working for you and paying those benefits, just like a retirement system trust does, right? You make some contributions. You would love to be fully funded. So then you're just kind of paying the new benefits and the administrative expenses, and all pension benefits are paid out of that trust. So that idea of some goal setting on what is it you actually are looking for, and that same little model of 30 years, you could say 250, 250, 250 for whatever when Worcester Regional, and then go, oop, here's another, I'm making this up because I don't know your numbers, like 9 million, increasing a couple percentages a year. Maybe you will get to fully funded in 30 years, under that. So those are the kind of things that you can say, yeah, maybe in the fall, once we have all this stuff in place, it's quite simple for us to model these sort of like 30-year funding plans. Just like you probably see on the Worcester Regional reports, right? You'll see a funding schedule, exact same thing. It's just a method to get that mortgage paid off, is really what you're doing. And with some goals in mind on, how well funded do you want to be?
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Malinowski.
Thank you, Linda. You summarized a lot of material very well. So thank you for making it very clear. I do not have any questions, but I look forward to working with you in the future.
Thank you.
Mr. Healy.
Hi, Linda. How are you?
Good.
Actually, there may be a series of questions, but it's one basic theme. Understanding that there are some communities, I think Mr. Stivers said we're in the 100 teens or so. That means there's 100 some communities that I don't want to say are in better shape, but have a higher percentage of funding that they've achieved. Are there any communities that you can point to that have had strategies other than simply, I guess there's two basic strategies. One is you increase your annual contribution to the fund. And number two, somehow you decrease the benefits that fall into the OPEB bucket. Putting those two aside, are there any strategies that any of these very successful communities to drive up that percentage number have used that you've seen that we might think about in the either near or medium term?
So instead of here's this fixed dollar amount maybe, and we might tweak it a little and increase it over time, some communities will ask to calculate what we're going to call an actuarially determined employer contribution. Our report provides that number for you, and I'm gonna, I guess I'll hit stop share, and I gotta go look at my report because I didn't know how to do that without doing that. So hold on. So we calculate that, but for some communities, that number is like right now not achievable, right? It's just too large. But others would say, okay, can you please, here's what we're paying right now. We're comfortable with increasing until we get to this actually determined contribution, and how will that look? Okay, one of the things that happens, as I mentioned, as you get better funded and your policy becomes a little more robust, your discount rate increases, therefore your liabilities drop. So you're not only chasing a better funded ratio, you're also chasing a better discount rate, right? So Lisa pointed out, oh my gosh, there's so many communities with, you know, zero assets, right? Well, they're all at the bond rate. They're not chasing anything right now. They're gonna have to just live with the bond rate. And literally we look it up on a chart, and we use the bond buyers. They come up with a bond rate every Thursday, right? But on June 30th, we look it up. It was 2.16. A year before that, it was 2.21, and a year before that, it was 3.58, I believe. So that bond rate between 19 and 20 dropped 130 basis points. Do you know what that does to liabilities? It like more than doubles them. But going the other way, if we can start working to a plan, and sometimes you don't need to be like hugely funded, but with a little bit better robust plan for future contributions, you can push that discount rate up. And we have these really, we call them our ugly tables in the back of our report, table 1, 2, and 3. They go on and on and on to like 2118, I believe, is the final year of the last, literally the last benefit paid of the group you've got right now. We want to see that your assets will never run out. With a robust funding policy, that's our proof. One, to the auditors, they want to kind of see that please prove to us their assets won't run out. Then you can say, Linda, yes, you can use the long-term rate of return. So that's 100 basis points for you guys, right? 665 is the long-term rate of return, but we're discounting at 565. So there's another, 100 basis points generally decreases liabilities by about 25%, 25%, depending on the benefits. So, you're looking for those kinds of things to get you to the long-term rate of return. That report that you're looking at, the comparative city-town report, hopefully, I think it does, has the discount rates used. So be careful when you're doing comparisons, right? If you see like a 7, that's probably a long-term rate of return. I don't know if the thing has both the bond rate and the long-term rate and the discount rate. If the long-term rate and the discount rate are the same, that means they've got enough assets and a robust funding policy to be able to discount at the long-term rate. So that helps. And it helps you kind of chase a fixed, a fixed number. Otherwise, your liabilities are kind of, subject to that bond rate that, is based on what is the borrowing rate that municipalities, endure. Other considerations, by the way, too, that people throw out, the answers are unclear, but it's your ratings, right? Your how important is that? In the rating agencies, some comments I get is, Linda, we tried to go for an upgrade, and all they keep harping on are our pension and our OPEB liabilities. They don't think the assumptions are conservative enough. If you go to Moody's, they want pension liabilities discounted at 4%, something crazy. So there's those considerations too, right? Because if you take our report, I'm not saying you, if one takes our report, throws it on the shelf, hands it to the auditor and does nothing, that is not going to be looked at favorably by the rating agencies. Whereas, effort toward reviewing your benefits all the time, as you mentioned, possibly decreasing the benefits. The problem with that in Massachusetts is once you adopt 32B, which is the statute that are these benefits, you can only charge retirees 50% of the cost of the health benefits. So you're kind of stuck there. There's not much, if you're at 50, which you are not, there's nowhere else to go, right? In terms of benefits, finding, maybe good plans. I think that's what we noticed when we saw not many increases in plans this year. We kind of scratched our head and said, yeah, but are they like remodeling the plans and basically passing more cost on to the retirees in terms of co-pays or co-insurance or whatever? You know, premiums are staying looking nice, but perhaps the out-of-pocket stuff might be shifting.
Okay.
So those are the things. It's really the coming up with some goals and the idea of where do you want to be? And again, you don't want to take current funds that might be used to hire a teacher or a police officer and say, oh, we're going to fund our OPEB trust. It's not sexy. It's not that, you know, exciting, right? To fund these long-term obligations.
Okay. All right. Lisa, I'm good.
Okay, great. Thank you. So I did have a couple questions. One, someone else asked and one you already answered. So I appreciate it very much. I think kind of as everyone has said, it's something we're really going to have to look at as we go into the next budget season. We appreciate you coming. It was a pleasure meeting you and you gave us a ton of information. It was a great presentation. So
Thank you very much.
thank you very much. And we look forward to working with you in the future.
Thank you.
All right, thanks.
Thank you. Take care. All right, next up on the agenda, Mr. Roselli for the fiscal year 21 audit. If we could bring him over.
We have Carla here too, as you can
Oh.
see.
Hi, Carla. How are you?
Hi,
I was
good.
wondering whose shoulder I was seeing moving in the background.
Yeah, me. We're sharing, so we
We're
figure
sharing.
safety in numbers.
Yeah.
So
Okay, that's perfect. Brian, do you want to do a brief introduction to, or Carla, to Roselli Clark and Associates and how we got here?
I'm up. Yep.
Perfect.
Yep. Hi, Tony. How are you?
Very good, thank you.
Great to see you.
You too.
Tony, it has replaced our longtime retired auditor, Bill Freyer. Tony and his staff this year had done a great job first year, COVID year, all of it. It's been a wild ride, as we know, but here we are. We have the reports and Tony's ready to present. So off to you, Tony.
Sure. Just a quick introduction. I've been doing this, it seems like forever. I started at Touche Ross, which merged with Deloitte Touche, is now Deloitte, back in 1984. So I'm going on close to 40 years of working in the accounting sector. I was immediately, when I was in Bentley College at the time, one of the things they said is you don't want to do municipal, and they had one like class devoted to municipal, and you took that class and it was like 3 weeks. So you never got any training because they said, you're never going to see this. You're not going to do this. You don't want to do it. Well, guess what? The first day at Touche Ross, they put me on the Town of Watertown audit. And I'm like, wait a minute. I don't know anything about this. And I was promised I wasn't going to have to do any of this. So I ended up becoming a municipal specialist at Touche Ross. I left in about 1990 and started my own company with another gentleman from Touche Ross. And right now we've grown. We're auditing almost 70 cities and towns, and over 100 if you count the school districts, water districts, fire districts, and so on. I think about 130. So we're one of the top, I think top 2 at this point in the state of Massachusetts in terms of sheer quantity of audits we do. So Bill Freyer approached me about a year and a half ago and said, Tony, I'm thinking of retiring, and I've known Bill forever. He was a KPMG guy. He said, do you want to take on my practice? So we looked at it, we kicked the tires, and we said, yeah, let's do it. As long as your clients want to transition over, let's do it. So that's where we're at. You were a client of Bill's. Right now, you're a client of Roselli Clark and Associates. And it was a transition year. So I'm not going to tell you there were no bumps in the road. You also had a first year for the actuary. So the report, the actuarial report that's normally available like in August, September, didn't come out till January because Linda had to reacclimate herself with everything and go through the entire data routine, which is a very lengthy process the first year. So, and then you had ARPA, you had CARES, you just had a lot of things rolling in. I got COVID in February. I'm good now, but I got COVID in February, so I was laid up for a little bit. So one thing after another, but here we are, we're at the finish line. We got you a report. We met the deadlines, which is great. And so I'm here to do the presentation. I don't know if you want to pull it up, Brian, and we can go from there.
Sure. Okay.
Okay, super. And I'm going to be able to answer some of those OPEB questions that Linda was unable to answer. So when we get to my OPEB slide, that'll be something that I'll remind myself about the OPEB bonds and the, some of the things with the rates, so we can maybe add some color to that, which will be good. So today, I'm Tony Roselli. Like I said, I'm a partner with Roselli Clark and Associates. So we'll do a quick introduction of what an audit is and why we're doing an audit and why Southborough needs an audit. I'm going to look at economic trends. I'm going to look at your bond rating. Why do you have a AAA? I'm going to give you some tremendous insight as to why you folks have a AAA and some other towns don't. I have a slide on OPEB. I'm going to keep that limited because Linda spent about an hour and 20 minutes on that. So we'll see if we can keep that down to answering some of the questions that weren't able to be answered. And talk about pension real quick. Quick slide on ARPA. Then I've got some informational items we'll go through, some observations, and I have questions at the end, but please feel free to jump in at any point. I think it's easier to answer the questions on the fly as opposed to saving them till the end. So let's go to the next slide, Brian. So what's an audit? I mean, there's a bunch of reasons why you might need an audit. First of all, you're a government entity, and if you reach certain thresholds, you fall under what's called the Yellow Book, which is GAGS, Generally Accepted Government Auditing Standards, which forces you to have an audit. A second reason why you might have an audit is if you receive over $750,000 in federal funding, you're required to have an audit. A third reason is if you are an issuer of more than 10 million in bonds, you have to have an audit done within 270 days of the end of your fiscal year. And then the fourth reason is it's just good business practice. So even some of my smaller clients out in the western part of the state, I tell them, hey, once every 3 years, you should have someone come in, kick the tires, do an audit, provide some transparency to your financial process. Southborough basically meets all of those criteria. So, and this is the first year you're actually, in a while that you're actually having to do a single audit, which caused the audit to expand a little bit. And that's because of the CARES Act. You got enough CARES funding to push you over the 750. So the audits require us to review, it's an internal control over the major transaction types, and those are your receipts, your disbursements, and your payroll. Those are your major transaction types. So we have to review internal control over those, and we're required under SAS 115 at the bottom of this slide that if we have material weaknesses or significant deficiencies, we're required to report those in a formal document to governance, and governance is the Board of Selectmen. And as part of that, we do a risk assessment and other things in material areas. One of the misnomers about an audit is, the town clerk steals $20 from dog funds. How come the auditor didn't catch that? And the thing I like to really emphasize to folks is when we do an audit, it's a sampling. We can't possibly look at every transaction. And like I said, we go through, we do risk assessment. So we're probably not going to catch that $20 theft in the town clerk's office unless we come across it by accident. It's in one of our samples. So I try to really emphasize that what we do is not a forensic audit. It's a financial statement audit that's verifying the balances that Brian and Carla give to us and that we provide to the investment community, the feds, the state, and so on. So I just wanted to kind of, push that through. Some towns say, hey, Tony, can you take a closer look at a department? We have some concerns in this particular department. Revenues don't look quite like they should. Is there something possibly going on in that department? So those are called departmental reviews, where we would go into the department and expand the scope of the audit by adding a more thorough review of a particular department that might be causing concerns to you folks, or we may spot something that says, hey, this is a concern. Do you want to do any expanded procedures in that particular area? So that's kind of what an audit is. Any questions, feedback on that first slide? Okay, let's jump into the economic trends. Good trend here. Your reserve balances are going up. I did a 5-year look back, and let's talk about what reserve means. Reserve means on a GAAP basis, and I use the Standard & Poor's definition of reserves. They add your stabilization fund, your undesignated fund, and your assigned fund balances all into a pot and call that your reserve fund. And then they use that to do a lot of measurements. So that's your reserve fund. That's been going up. That's good. And it's a nice trend. It shows that there's some good management going on in the town. Next slide, Brian, unless there's a question on that. Okay, so reserve ratio. Let's compare it to some other metrics or some other benchmarks. The S&P high metric is 15%. So S&P to score you a 1 on reserve ratio needs to see a 15%. You folks are at about 9.8. So you're actually in the second tier. You're scoring a 2. And I'll talk about why that's not critical, why you're not a 1 when we get to our discussion on the bond rating. The state average is about 10. So you're right around the state average. And the low metric is below 4. So you're well above the low metric. But right now you're at about 9, right between 9 and 10%, which is right around the state average. And again, it's a good place for Southborough to be. I'm not going to say you need to be at 15%, but I certainly don't want you dropping below 8%, which drops you into the next. It drops you into that next tier on the S&P rating scale and could actually cause a little bit of challenges once they start calculating your bond rating. And we can talk about exactly how that works when we get to it. So if there's no questions on that, we can go to the next slide, Brian. This talks about kind of why your reserves increased. Your local receipts were 1.7 million above forecast. Your expenditures were 600,000 under budget. And some of that was offset by planned uses of free cash. So you take your excess in receipts, your under in budgets, and you subtract your free cash to get your approximate increase in reserves. Like I said, it approximates state average. It's in a tier 2. And right now, fortunately, even though you're in tier 2, usually AAA, you got to be in tier 1, but you have other great things going on, which we're going to talk about. But you have a bond rating of AAA from Standard & Poor's, which is the highest possible investment grade. And you have a AA1 from Moody's, which is 1 notch below the top investment grade. So if there's aren't any questions on that, we can go to the next slide. So here I talk about how S&B gets to your AAA. So first, there's 7 categories: institutional framework, economy, management, budgetary flexibility, budgetary performance, liquidity, and debt and contingent liabilities. So S&P goes through each category and assigns a grade to it. And you can see that each category has a % weighted average. So your institutional framework, which is the legal environment that you operate in within Massachusetts, within the Division of Local Services. Massachusetts has a score of 2 by the S&P, and you're getting a weight of 10% on that. The economy they score as a 30% weight. So that's a big, big, big score there. 1/3 of your bond rating is based on the economic activity in Southborough. Management is a 20% score. So you can see that economy and management, that's 50%. Half your score weighs there. So let's go back to economy. How do they come up with a 1? Two things they look at are your equalized valuation divided by your population. And Southborough is at 273,000. The gold standard is 195,000. So you're well above the gold standard for equalized valuation divided by population. So it's very important to keep those housing values high by having a great education system, by providing great services, by making Southbridge a desirable community. You keep your housing values high and you keep your equalized valuation high to maintain that metric. The second thing they look at is your per capita income. And if you're at 150% of the US average, that's considered the gold standard. You folks are at 156%. So once again, you've exceeded the gold standard on your per capita divided by the US per capita. And then lastly, you've got the wealth index. Southbridge is at 275 on the wealth index, with the mean and average being 100. So you're almost 3 times on the wealth index. So all of these things contributed to the S&P giving you a 1 on this score. They said, hey, Southbridge has got great economic metrics. We're going to score them a 1. So you got the full 30 on that score. Next is management.
Hey, Tony, if I can interrupt you for a second.
Sure.
So you don't get bashed by any commentators. I make the same mistake, but you've said Southbridge 3 times now, and that's a little ways down the road.
Oh, I'm sorry.
That's okay.
That's
okay. Southbridge is a fine community too, but it's
Southbridge is one of my clients, and I was working on it today, so Southbridge is on my mind. I apologize.
It's not a problem. No need to apologize.
You should have interrupted me the first time. So Southborough has a AAA. Southbridge doesn't. Hopefully, there's no Southbridge listeners. But so management score. Management score is broken out into 7 different categories. They look at your what your reserve policies are. How much are you going to put in stabilization? How much are you going to keep in free cash? They look at your policies. What are your policies? What are your do you have a 5-year forecast? Are you doing cash flows? What are your investment policies? So they look at a bunch of these types of things. I'm sure when Brian is doing his conference call that they asked for your most recent policies and you email them to S&P. And then they'll see, are these policies being enforced? So if you say, hey, our goal is a 15% reserve ratio, but you're only at 10, they're going to say, hey, well, you're not enforcing it. So your policies need to be reasonable so that you're enforcing it. So they look at your policies. Is the town enforcing them? Yes. And that's how they come up with the grade. Not too many communities get a 1 on this. So 2 is pretty good. You've got to be almost perfect to get a 1. So 2 is good on this. It gives you a weighted score of 40. Instead of 20. 20 would have been a perfect score, so you got a 40 on that. Still didn't hurt you at the end, but that's it caused it to go up, your score to go up a little higher for AAA. Your next rating is based on your budgetary flexibility, and that's what we talked about earlier. That's your reserve ratio. So if you're at 15%, you would have got a 1 here, and you would have got a score of a 10, which would have been a perfect score. Instead, you're in that second tier. So you got a score of 20. Now, here's where you need to be careful. If you're using free cash and you're using your reserves and you drop below 8%, okay, you're going to slide into a score of a 3 on the budgetary flexibility, which is going to kick your weighted score up to 30, it's going to change that score at the bottom to 1.6. I already did the calculation for you instead of 1.5. 1.5 is an automatic AAA. 1.6 says it's not automatic. You're just in the discussion for AAA. And what would happen if you got a 1.6 is you might keep the AAA, but you get what's called a negative outlook instead of a stable outlook. So be very careful with managing that, because you folks are at, like, I think 9.6. So you're close to that 8%, slipping below that 8%. So be careful how you manage that. That's one of my cautions when I go through this that I see for you folks. Budgetary performance is how well do you do against your budget? And the only way you would score a 1 is if you beat your budget by over 5%. But in Massachusetts use zero-based budgeting. So your revenues are intended to equal your expenses. So you very rarely are going to beat your budget by 5%. As long as you're 0 to 5%, you score the 2, which you got a way to score 20 on that. Liquidity is cash. How much cash you have versus debt. Your ratio is 600%. The gold standard is 120%, way above the gold standard. And cash to expenses. Cash to annual expenses, you're at 40%. The gold standard is 15%. So again, on the liquidity side, you're smashing it to pieces. So you got a 1 there. Perfect score. And then on the debt side, it's annual debt to expense is 6%. If you're under 8%, that's the gold standard. So again, you're scoring right at a 1. And then your total debt to revenue is 45%. You're a little high there because the gold standard is 30. But when you blend the two, it gets you right back to a 1. So when we mix all that up, we get you down to a 1.5, and that gets you your AAA. So it's just a mix of things, not quite as complicated as the OPEB calculation that Linda presented, but there's just a bunch of things that go into this calculation. And I actually do a class on this out at Amherst and out at the different agencies that have that invite me to speak. I'll do a class and I go through each step. It takes about an hour and a half to go through. I take a real live town and I go through the entire process. And it's pretty well received because it allows you can see that there's certain areas. They say you were a AA+. You could actually try to manage certain things to sneak you into that AAA category. So it's a really good tool to have. Any questions on this? Okay. So just all I can say is you got a AAA, continue to use free cash. Basically try to use it for one-time items like snow and ice or capital. Make efforts to replenish free cash, which it seems like you've been forecasting your revenues conservatively. Look at places where you can enhance revenue. When was the last time you looked at your user fees for various departments? Do those need to maybe increase? Or are they okay? Look at what surrounding communities are doing for different fees. Is there a way to enhance revenue that way? Monitor your budget, which it appears that you're doing, so that you can turn back surpluses. Continue to prepare your long-term financial projections, enforce your financial reserve policies. And importantly, which we just had that big presentation about, pay attention to OPEB. They always ask OPEB questions in these conference calls with S&P. Okay. Next, Brian. Sorry. Okay, OPEB. Won't get too much into it because Linda's already gone through a lot of this, but a couple of questions that came up was, why don't we go out and just borrow for OPEB? Because in an arbitrage situation, if we can borrow at 2% and we're earning 7%, we're in a great situation. So you need special legislation to do that. So you'd have to have some of your state reps put something together with the town financial people, and you'd probably have to work with the Division of Local Services. A lot of communities went through this thought process about a year ago when the pandemic hit. The bond ratings the bond rates dropped to under 1%, and they were like, holy cow, let's go borrow our OPEB. And DLS said, time out, you can't do it that fast. You need special legislation. It's probably going to take you a year to do. So some communities are actually kicking the tires and getting the vehicle set up. Let's get it set up. We don't have to do it, but let's get it set up so that if something crazy like that happens where bond rates just drop, let's now take advantage of that and go grab some money from the markets and fund OPEB that way. One of the things that you need to be aware of, though, is if you do OPEB in that manner through a bond, the bond is a taxable bond, not a non-taxable bond. So the rate would not be as low as 2%. It might be 4%. So it might be a little higher, but there's still a gap there. So hopefully that answers one of the selectmen's questions about the taxable bonds. And one of the other questions that came up was the healthcare rates. We audit a lot of insurance collaboratives. And what I'm seeing is when I look at their fund balances, so the standard out there is to maintain 20%, 20 to 30% of claims in your fund balance. That's what the standard is for these insurance collaboratives. Some of them right now are close to 100%. And the reason being is that there's been a huge slowdown in healthcare costs during this pandemic. So what they're doing is they're passing the savings on to the members who belong to these collaborative. They're giving you like a free month of premium, or they're lowering your rates. So I'm not seeing that 7% right now. And I've talked to a bunch of folks in the industry, and I said, is this an anomaly, or is this something that, is just going to be a one-time thing? And are we going to go right back to having these skyrocket insurance rates? And because if it's not an anomaly, we should start to talk to our OPEB people about maybe, adjusting those healthcare rates that they've now got at 7% instead of a little lower. So that's what I'm seeing out there in the healthcare field, just through my audits of these collaboratives in the health field. Any questions on either one of those 2 points from whoever asked those questions?
Tony, this is Sam. I was the one who asked the question about the borrowing. And again, I'd be interested if you have knowledge of specific towns who are working on a special act from the legislature to allow for that. I'd be interested in knowing who they are and taking a look at that. I mean, it seems to me that's an interesting thing to have in our back pocket to potentially use. If we could do that in a way that didn't cost $1 million of legal work or whatever to get done, that might be, again, an interesting door to keep open if we could. So I appreciate any updates.
Yeah, yes, I will. I know Nantucket was taking a deep dive into it. And Nantucket is a community that's always ahead of the curve. They're very well managed, has a ton of money, and they're always looking at things like that. So I know they were taking a deep dive into it, and I'll reach back with them and see where that stands. It's getting a lot of chatter right now. So you are on par with saying, hey, why don't we take advantage of that arbitrage situation? Because it is getting a lot of chatter out in the industry right now. So definitely something. Yes, I will. I'll pass along anything I can off to Brian.
And if a bunch of towns are doing that, then it's possible to sort of get with the crowd and sort of slide through the legislature with a group effort as opposed to single.
Exactly. No, but it's great. It's great thinking. I mean, when you brought that up, I was like, okay, you must have some sort of finance background or, some sort of a background in that area to bring that up, because not a lot of people are thinking that way.
I'm just sort of cheap. That's it. So thank you.
So what else did I have? One other thing I had on OPEB, you may want to adopt, it may be way ahead of time, but here's what I'm seeing happening. So there's a pension windfall that's going to happen in 2036. It just happened in Leominster. They had a pension windfall in 2020. And for about 5 years, they were saying, we're going to fund OPEB, we're going to fund OPEB, we're going to fund OPEB. Well, guess what? It got to the windfall. They got 100% funded on their pension. And guess what happened? It didn't go to OPEB. The schools got involved. The unions got involved. And it was just this crazy fight over this extra $5 or $6 million that became free. or that freed up, that was baked into the budget. So what I'm telling folks to do now is start to plant that seed. Start to talk about creating a policy that when the windfall happens, a certain percentage of that should go to OPEB. Start to create that, start to put that in folks' minds that that's the plan. I know Marlboro did a study of if they take the windfall and put it into OPEB, they'll be fully funded by earlier than 2050, which I thought was a really, really nice situation for them. So you could actually have your actuary run numbers for you. How much do you need if you do the 250, maybe raise it a percentage every year till you get to the pension windfall. I don't like to call it windfall, but the pension normal cost. And then how much, once we start bringing in, how quickly, create a goal. Do we want to be fully funded by 2045, 2050? So create a goal of how much money you'll need from that pension money to get to your goal of being fully funded on OPEB. I think that would be a really neat study to go through and really show some forward thinking in that regard, because what's going to happen is you're going to get to 2036, and I promise you there's going to be a big fight. But if you start thinking about it now, start owning some of that money now, I think it might make it easier to transition into that when that happens. So that's my 2 cents on OPEB. Any questions on that? Okay. Pension. Okay. Unfortunately, you're in Worcester County. So even though the town has great demographics, you're in with, I think it's 93 other members that belong to the Worcester County retirement system. So what's happening is that for years, the assessment was probably lower than it should be. They were using a discount rate of 8% when everyone else switched to 7.5. Now everyone's at 7 and they're at Worcester County's at 7.5. So what's happened is your funded ratio is one of the lowest in the state at 50.3%. When most, the state average is 65% and a lot are exceeding 70%. In fact, Leominster, like I said, it's 100%. So it's unfortunate you belong to the county because you can't really go on your own on this. But my message here is that in order for Worcester County to be fully funded by 2036, it's math. Your assessment's going to start going up higher than you want it to. It's the only way they're going to make it to 2036. So expect, when you're doing your long-term forecasting, factor in some big increases in your Worcester County pension assessment. It's the only way they're going to get fully funded by 2036. So that was one of the kind of the weak points of the financial profile of the town of Southborough. And so are there any questions on that?
Tony, quick question, if I can, Sam again. Do we have a good picture of what those increases are going to be? Do the Worcester retirement system people, are they positioned to say your number is going to go up by $1 million in 2028, another million?
Right now they should. I haven't looked at it, but they should have a target of getting there, but they do it for the entire system, not specifically for Southborough. So you really need to, if Brian could actually say, hey, what percentage of that as we go up would be the Southbridge percent, and then you can kind of track that to see how much your particular pension is going to spike, unless you already have those numbers, Brian.
Yeah, last I knew, Tony, they were saying 10 to 12%. Plan on that.
So
an increase, that's significant.
As long as Brian has those numbers, that's great. And Tony, it's Southborough again.
Oh,
It's late.
It's late.
We ought to have a fine for each one of these.
Carlos already paid me, or I'd say deduct $5 for every time I say the wrong name. So, yeah, great. So just real quick on ARPA. ARPA is more of a 2022 item. So we did not audit any ARPA or look at it, but you're a non-entitlement community. You got allocated 3.05 million. Your spending is restricted to the 4 buckets, either revenue replacement, premium pay, direct COVID, or certain infrastructure. But the final rule, which just came out, I believe in January, allowed you to take a one-time $10 million option to go full revenue replacement, which basically makes this available for any government type activity, except for pensions, stabilization, debt service. And I think there was one other that escapes me, but those are the 3 major ones that you cannot spend ARPA on, but you can basically spend it on anything else if you elect the 10 million. So most towns that are under the 10 million are electing the 10 million, because then you have flexibility. You can still spend it on those items that are in the buckets, but now you have flexibility. So I don't know if there's any questions on ARPA. Like I said, we didn't do any audits of ARPA or any of that. That's a 2022 item. Okay, so some informational items. SAS 115 we talked about. That's if we come across something that we believe is a material weakness or a significant deficiency. And an example of that is if Brian's not doing his bank reconciliations. Okay, and then he tries to do all 12 at once in June, and then it doesn't balance. That would be a material weakness in internal control that we would have to report as a material weakness. So there were no material weaknesses or significant deficiencies. I try to be careful with what I put in the management letter when they're minor items. Like, for example, the fixed assets were kind of using an older system that was a tax-based system. So it's very clumsy and clunky and very difficult to work with. That's solved. So I didn't think there was a need to put that in the management letter. We worked through that with the financial department. It's been solved. There's a new system in place that's going to make it much more streamlined. But I try to be careful about putting minor things like that in, because I'm cognizant of your bond rating also, because if S&P gets a hold of your management letter, which they have been asking for, and sees a whole bunch of minor things. I had one community where they put right in their bond rating report that they thought something was a material weakness, and I had to talk them off the ledge that it wasn't a material weakness. So I'm very careful about the minor things. We try to talk those over with staff. And the things that I believe are a little more significant would go in the management letter. If they're material weaknesses, they have to be reported to governance. Second is network security, which is kind of what you folks were talking about when I first logged on. You had a gentleman on who's coming in to reinforce your IT. And one of the things that I'm making all my clients aware of is that the hackers are out there, the municipalities are vulnerable. Now, we don't do a deep dive because we're not IT specialists. We do audits, but we do ask questions. On the surface, I didn't really see anything that I would be say, whoa, that's bad. So, but it's a good idea to really challenge what's there for network security, to provide training. One of the things I recommend, which I'm not sure if you folks have done yet or not, is actually have a security audit done by a firm independent of your IT department. So it's kind of like I come in and do an audit of Brian and Carla. It's independent. So Brian can say, hey, everything's fine, but it's really not valid until I, do the audit and say, yeah, it's fine. So it's pretty, to me, to have that done, if you haven't already had it done, is probably a really good idea. Have a specialist that comes in that knows where vulnerabilities are, that can identify them, that can give you a nice report on what to watch for and what to, what to address. And particularly where we're doing a lot of remote stuff now, it's really important to make sure your security is top notch. The last thing you want know about is reading in the front page of the paper, big security breach, and you see it all the time, where some money got shipped off to Latin America or out to Russia because somebody came in, stole a password, and was able to get into your bank accounts. So, ask questions. Like I said, ask questions if you have any. I know that was a hot topic for you guys when I first logged in. Next is the fraud risk mitigation, and the town really does a good job of reconciling with departments, looking at revenue trends. But I always put it in here as a reminder to stay on top of your fraud risk mitigation. Always check your departments. Are they turning money over timely? Are they turning money once they have a certain amount? Are they turning it over timely? What's their internal record keeping process for money? Are they providing receipts? Are they reconciling to those receipts? So those are really important things to be looking at as a financial team, just to make sure that your town is free or as free as possible of fraud. Next, there's a new lease accounting standard. So we'll be asking for a whole bunch of new things for GASB 87. I won't bore you folks with it, but we'll be bothering Kyle and Brian for that information. Long-term obligations, that's OPEB and pension. We've already talked about that. And ARPA, we've already talked about ARPA. One thing I'll caution you with on ARPA, which I don't think I mentioned on the previous slide, is be careful about using it in a budget situation. That's a recurring budget situation, because I'm preaching this to all my clients, because I had one client, a big client, that took $10 million and just put it in their budget and said, okay, we're balanced. So we gave the school what they wanted. We gave the department heads what they wanted. And I said to them, what are you going to do 3 years down the road when you don't have that 10 million? You've created a structural budget deficit. Now you got to go in and do all these cost cuts, which is not going to be pleasant. So I'm trying to really reinforce to the towns that if it's an emergency, absolutely, that's what it's there for. It's there for an emergency. It's called a Rescue Plan Act. But for the most part, where you do have a lot of flexibility here, I would love to see it be used to pay for some of your capital instead of doing borrowing. Maybe if you have which I don't think you have this year, but if you have a snow and ice issue, you could use it for a snow and ice issue. So more things like that than plugging a budget. So that's just my caution to the wind on ARPA. So if there's no questions on that, we can go to the observations. I believe this is the last slide. So a couple of observations we had. There's a bunch of special revenue accounts. Looks like they haven't been used or looked at in a few years. They had no activity. I think, what was it? A little over 100,000, Brian, in those, I think, on the special revenue accounts. I think that's what I had indicated. I don't have it on the slide. But what happens is you have turnover in departments. So say the department's got a bunch of gifts or mitigation funds or things they can use in their normal operations of the department. And then you have turnover. The next person that comes in really doesn't know they have that available to them. So some of these stagnant accounts could be just lost in the shuffle. So it's important to have conversations with your department heads and say, hey, Council on Aging or Senior Center or Public Works, you've got this money available. You could spend it on something. Some of this is old grants that just probably got coded incorrectly. The expense might have gone to the general fund instead of to the special revenue fund. But if the account is closed down and all the reports have been sent to the state and the state signed off, basically in a situation like that, I would say you make a transfer back to the general fund and it becomes free cash, as long as it's not a giant amount. Same thing with capital projects. There's a bunch of accounts that you can repurpose. So if you've got any capital items that need to be done, you can take your stagnant capital projects. So say you had a building that you projected to cost $3 million, but it only cost you $2,950,000. That means you had $50,000 left in that account. You can actually take that and use it for some other capital item that's similar to the purpose for what that capital item was for. You could also take up to 50,000 and use it to pay down debt service, annual debt service in your annual budget. That has to be appropriated at a town meeting. So those are the couple of the observations I had. Overall, I think the financial department did a great job. We tested 40, 40, 40 out of the major transaction types. So that's 120. And I think we did about 15 to 20 attributes for each. So we did well over 1,000 tests. I did not have one exception, not even one thing that was wrong, or I thought that was remarkable. Usually there's a little ding there that you have to explain. I didn't, with all that, and it was all done randomly. So I thought that was really, I just wanted to congratulate the financial department for really putting forth that effort. Provided us everything we had to. You shut down your balance sheets timely. You got everything into the state. So good job. This entire town is just to me, is a textbook of really good management from the top down, and really good job, guys. I wasn't sure what to expect, but it's a really well-run place, and I like doing audits in well-run communities. Those 30-page management letters are not pretty, and it usually takes me till midnight to finish my exit presentation. So I don't know if you have any closing questions or anything to add.
Great. Thank you, Tony. What we'll do is we'll go round table, but I wanted to thank you for the comprehensive report. Brian and Carla, was there anything you wanted to add, or things that Tony may have mentioned that you would like to add on to before we open it up to the board?
Just with the observations that Tony had in the management letter with regard to stagnant accounts. Well, as you know, in the warrant for this upcoming town meeting, we're going to be repurposing a lot of the capital project accounts. And I've also put in place, in my spare time when not doing ARP and FEMA and CARES, I have a quarterly report that I send out to the departments now on their special revenue funds as well, just to kind of, have a talk with them about what their plan is, what their spending plan is, and if there's an account that's been there for a while, how we're gonna deal with that. So I have tried to improve communication on that end as well, previously in response to the management letter. So yeah, we're trying to clean up some things.
Okay, Brian, do you want to add anything?
No, I'm good for now. Thank you.
Okay, great. Thank you. Thank you, Carla. Mr. Dennington, we'll start with you. Any questions or comments?
I really don't. I think it was a lot of information, and the timing of it worked well to come right after the OPEB presentation. So I think I'm good for now. Thanks.
Great. Thank you, Ms. Malinowski.
Thank you. Hi, Tony. Nice to meet you.
Hi.
I did have two follow-up questions on the economic trends information. We have a lot of discussion about how to project local receipts. And, whatever you take in excess above what you project goes into free cash, right?
Yes.
So do you think that that's a good practice to be more conservative on your local receipt projection? And does that play directly into your bond rating?
Yes. Definitely, when I advise folks that are working on their tax recaps and filling in the local receipt, I always tell them, do like an average, a 5-year average or something, come up with a number and then drop it 5 or 10%, just in case there's a blip, just like the pandemic. The pandemic crushed local receipts. I'm not sure how you folks handled that.
We did okay.
In Greater Boston, because I do a lot of the big cities around Boston, they got hammed because they have the hotel excise and things that really, just got absolutely crushed. The trend that we're seeing for next year is that the motor vehicle excise maybe lower than you're used to seeing, where you had a great economy with people buying brand new vehicles, so you got the higher excise. Now what you're seeing is folks buying used vehicles, so you're just recirculating the same cars. You're not gaining any extra excise, and because of the chip shortage, the big car companies are not putting out as many cars. So I'm telling folks, when you do your recap, be cognizant of your excise tax. It's going to probably be lower than you think, and for 22. So that's a great strategy to have, is to be conservative on your local receipts.
Okay. And currently we use all of our free cash as our starting point for our next year budget in general. And we've been talking about creating a stabilization policy. And do you have any recommendations? So what I don't want to do is create a policy and then be still in this kind of influx with our residential tax shift and not knowing what's going to happen with the commercial side. And so we intended on not using all of our free cash for this year, but we ended up just because of the situation that we're in, particular to Southborough, given the shift. So do you have any recommendations on creating a policy, but then not like binding yourself to it when you're getting evaluated on, well, this year you went against your own policy. So any recommendations on trying to create something to put more towards stabilization, but not making it so that it hurts us in the long run?
Yeah, I mean, what you've described is potentially dangerous, because if you have a year that's not that great, you could end up in a situation where you've used all your free cash and you haven't been able to replenish it through your budget monitoring and your forecast of revenue. You run into that anomaly. And I've seen communities get stuck in that anomaly, and then it's hard for them to recover. And then next thing you know, your bond rating's getting affected. And now once your bond rating gets affected, what you've done is you've increased your financing costs. So if you go out and do a borrowing, now you're looking at getting a bond that goes out 30 years at 3% instead of 2%. It's millions of dollars. So it's really important when you look at free cash to say, what portion of that should go into stabilization? What portion of that should we put towards the budget, if any? What portion should we put towards OPEB? What portion should we put towards capital projects? And it's really on a town by town basis. But you should really have a plan and then stick to that plan of how much. When you say go to the budget, I say that, okay, that's gone now. Hopefully we get it back, but it's gone. So you've got to say, what can we be prepared to lose on free cash that we might not get back? You've been fortunate. The economy's been great since 2008. So every year you've gotten that back, and people are getting comfortable with that. I'm not sure, with everything going on now, with inflation at 6.8% and interest rates about to skyrocket, I'm not sure what's going to happen in the next couple of years. So you could be in a situation where you could be running a little bit of a risk.
So would you recommend the policy be a percentage of your free cash or an actual dollar amount that you would put to stabilization?
I would say a percentage of your free cash.
Okay.
Because if you do a dollar amount, you might not know what your free cash is. So you always do a percentage of your free cash. So say it's, and you got to come up with a policy. What do you want to build your stabilization fund up to? And what I like to tell clients is the S&P likes to see the stabilization maybe go up to 5%. So your stabilization grows to 5%. Your undesignated fund balance grows to 5%, and then you stay at that 10%. That's a good zone for you folks, I think, given everything. You've got so many other things. You don't need to be at the 15%. Some towns need to get to 15% to get the higher bond rating. You don't, because you've got a lot of other really good things going on, but you don't want to fall below 8%. I think you want to stay in that 8 to 15% range.
So you think that if we get our stabilization percentage up to 5%, then that's going to help our reserve ratio to stay above.
Yeah,
the-
yeah, I think
Okay.
now you only need 3%. Even if you have a bad year, you should be able to you should still be at 3%. On the rest of it,
Okay.
it's going to keep you above the 8.
Okay. Okay. Awesome. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Mr. Healy.
Yeah. Hey, Tony, how are you?
Great.
Just actually a very quick question. First of all, thank you for very comprehensive and honestly encouraging. Nice to hear that an independent auditor has that view of the way the town is being managed. That's nice to hear. In terms of the Moody, you said we were a click below the gold standard, one of your favorite terms.
Yep.
Is that something that we should aspire to get that click up? And if so, does Moody do a little bit different than Standard & Poor's, or again, something that we should be thinking about?
Yeah, Moody's has got a very, very challenging model. So I don't see Southborough ever getting to a AAA with Moody's, because your equalized valuation will never be above 10 billion. That's the number that is a tier 1 for Moody's, and it carries the most weight. So there's only 13 AAAs on Moody's in the entire state of Massachusetts, and they're most Boston, Cambridge, Newton, Brookline, communities that have a lot of value in their real estate. And that's what's driving the AAA value for Moody's. So you're about as good as you can get for Moody's, the AA1. You're not going to go much higher than that. And the AAA at S&P maintain that. But right now you're at your optimum bond rating. There's no going up for you,
Okay.
for you guys.
All right.
Unless you bought another town and you got to you buy Northborough, you buy Northbridge.
We'll look into that.
You
All
merge
right. Thanks
together,
very
now
much.
you get your 10 billion.
All right. I'm good, Lisa. Thanks.
All right, thank you. Mr. Stivers.
Thank you. Thanks, Tony. Good to meet you tonight. I'm turned out Toots Ross, right along myself.
Sam,
lost
I
him.
think we lost you.
Sorry.
Your speaker, it's coming in and out.
And Sam, I was very reluctant to say we can't hear you.
Oh, okay.
There you go. You're all set. Go ahead, Sam.
I'm back. So, again, Tony, welcome. And I'm also a Touche Ross and Deloitte alum back in the 80s. So I think we overlapped a little bit there.
Oh, wow. I started in 84.
Yeah, I was there then too. The issue for me here is that, as Marty suggested, good news that we seem to have passed the test from the external viewpoint in our financial world. So again, kudos to our finance team for that. Also,
Sam,
I
I'm
appreciate-
sorry. We're getting back like a backfill on your microphone.
Okay.
It's like shuffling papers, kind of.
Yeah.
Any better?
Yes.
Any better? Okay, sorry. Good news that our finance team is doing a great job, and kudos to them. Couple of questions. One of the questions out of the last year's audit was there were some issues raised relative to some of the cash operations in Council of Aging and other places, and that's not on the report this time. So I'm assuming that nothing showed up there of concern during your audit process.
No, I mean, like I said, those when we look at a town that's got, a budget the size of yours, if those things popped up in our sample size, then they would be, we drill down. Nothing popped up that led me to believe that we need to go look at that. So yeah, to answer your question, I didn't see it as a concern.
Okay.
Now, maybe with the 2022 audit, if you folks want to come up with a plan to say, hey, specifically, these are some departments we might want you to look at further, do a deeper dive on, that's something we could talk about with the financial staff and kind of go into a little deeper.
Yeah, I'm not suggesting that specifically, but just it was flagged last year. And so it sounds like whatever is going on there is not an issue, which is good news, certainly. So That's basically it for me. But Tony, I particularly appreciate this is, I view this as a much more prospective, sort of higher level management suggestion content than we had in previous years. I think that's hugely valuable to learn more about what some other towns are doing in some of these areas, and suggesting things that may not be necessarily urgent, but things that we need to work into our longer term planning and discussion. So for me, that's one of the real values of having a larger firm do the audit. So I'm very pleased with how this is working. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Sam. And Tony, I have a question for you, and I actually have a question for Brian and Carla. So in the report, you talked about custodial credit risk and that we don't have a formal policy in a few instances. Is that something that you recommend we should look into, or are you comfortable with where we're at? It was relative to deposits, investments, specifically.
Yeah, I think in the cash area, there's some risks that you can accept. For example, it's difficult to have 100% insurance just because of the way you move money around, especially and at the end of the year, it's June 30th. So you could be getting ready to pay your pension or some other big bills. So money's moving around. So there's some things that are acceptable. What I would recommend is maybe looking at, and Bartholomew does a nice job with the cash, the policies on the stuff they're managing, maybe adopt it for your entire cash portfolio, not just the Bartholomew. I think they do the CPC and the OPEB, I think are the two big ones that they do. But maybe have them pull some standard process together that you folks can follow on everything else. And that may make sense, just to button that down.
Okay, thank you. And for Carla, so I know we talked about the 112,000 for the aggregate balance for the special revenue accounts. I'm just curious what that is. Is that a file that you could share with us? I'm just curious what makes up that balance. I know you're working towards getting it done, but if it's an easy thing to do, I would just be interested to know what makes up the 112.
Sure. Yep. I can run the report and just highlight the accounts on it. Yep. Not a problem.
Okay. Thank you.
Happy to do
So
that for you.
I appreciate it. Thank you, Carla. So Tony, that was it. Oh, go ahead.
One thing I do have to add is that I neglected to put the single audit in the packet. We did have a single audit this year for the first time in Southborough, and I didn't even think, and I didn't put it in the packet, but I will distribute that to you tomorrow, so you can take a look at that as well.
Okay, great. Thank you. Thank you, Tony. It was a pleasure meeting you. I agree that this was a great report. I think it had a lot of information. I mean, again, I get different firms are different, but I found a lot of valuable information in this. So thank you very much. We look forward to doing business with you as we go forward. And thank you for giving us your time tonight.
Hey, that's great feedback, and that makes it all worth it if someone gets something out of it. These little, when I look at a management letter, sometimes from another firm, and we're doing the town, and it's like someone forgot to sign an invoice, or out of 7,000 invoices, they forgot to sign one when they approve it. I don't think that has a lot of value, and that's something we, when we find little things like that, we'll talk about the financial staff with. But I think these comments really help you folks, prospectively managing forward, what to look out for, because something like dropping your bond rating could have financial consequences. Not planning for your for this pension spikes that are going to be happening could have financial consequences. And these are things that I think are important and bigger issues to discuss with towns. So I'm glad you appreciate that, really.
We do. And thank you so much. Have a great rest of your night. What's left of it.
Thank you very much.
You guys
Thank
too.
you, Tony.
Thanks again.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Much
Take care.
appreciated.
Yep, bye-bye.
So I'm going to jump around a little bit again. Under other matters, we have the budget update. So instead of what we have, Brian and Carla, clearly they're still at the townhouse. So Brian, if you want to just go over the cover page, we'll get into the individual and detailed budgets that we had questions on at our last meeting, and Mark can share. I mean, they didn't equate to a whole lot actually at the end of the day, but if you want to just touch on the cover sheet that you gave us on what the changes are, and then we will certainly cut you loose and you and Carla can get out of Dodge.
Yeah. So this is sounding familiar week to week or bi-week to bi-week, something like that. So we have had a few, what I would call mostly minor changes. We did some of the items as, advisory agreed to lower their reserve fund by 10,000. The ASABET, we updated local receipts. We actually increased local receipts because we saw that the first billing was still strong, and for excise, even though despite Tony's warning, I still feel like because of the nature of Southborough and the makeup of the leased vehicles and everything, we're probably very safe there. At least we got enough cushion. It may flatten, but we're still safe. So that's probably going to be the extent that we changed local receipts for a while. But we did remove the school capital article that's been talked about with the water heater, and we are about to analyze the ambulance billing for one more month to maybe change that before town meeting, but we'll know that in the next few days, actually, since the month ended. And that's the major highlights. We're at 2.30% now without the shift, and roughly 4.35 or right around there with the shift. So we've made progress, and I think now it's buttoning up those last few items that the board needs to deal with and moving ahead.
Okay, Chelsea, did you want to add anything to that?
The only other thing that changed was civil defense.
And you're digitized
Yes.
a little bit. You made it through most of the meeting. Okay. Okay, so Brian, while she's gone, did you want to, she mentioned civil defense. So I'm, again, I'll let her talk about her meeting, but you've adjusted that within the budget as well.
Yeah, and I believe it was 3,000 even.
Yeah, I
Yes.
think so.
Yeah, it was 3,000 even.
Okay, Chelsea, you're back. So if you want to just touch on the meeting that you had as well.
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes. Go right
Okay.
ahead.
So Andrew Pfaff and I met with Chief Achilles last week and went over the civil defense budget that we had talked about in our joint meeting. And we agreed that we do want to track the hours as Chief Achilles has been paying out of the fire department and or being reimbursed by FEMA. So we agreed that we do want to track it in civil defense, but continue to monitor it. So he did reduce that budget for the part-time salary line by $3,000. So it went from $926 to $2,000. And the overall year over year increase went from a 40% increase to a 10% increase. So he's gonna continue to work through that through the next year, and then we'll probably touch base with him in October or so to see kind of how we're doing. Obviously, it's dependent on what kind of things come up for the employee to have to deal with from an emergency management perspective, and whether it gets reimbursed or not. But rather than kind of create a fund that may not be used, that's kind of what we agreed to. So there was consensus between Andrew, myself, and the chief.
Okay, perfect. And Brian, you said that number's already, the 2,000's already adjusted.
It
Okay,
is.
so the other outstanding items that we're going to continue under the budget update, which is the ADA library, MTC, EDC, planning, and potentially Board of Health. So we're going to leave those currently where they're at on the agenda. We'll come back to it. So we just kind of split this. So Brian, Mark will update you on those other ones, and you can leave us if you would like. We appreciate you being here.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thanks.
Thank you.
for your time
Okay.
tonight.
Thank you. Next up, can we bring Catherine McPhee over to talk about warrant article 30 for the trails bylaw? Good evening, Catherine. Thank you for hanging around.
Of course, I love these meetings.
I know you do. Isn't it like the best?
Yeah, I was excited I was at the top, and then I realized.
Well, you're still kind of at the top, just later at the top. So do you want to just kind of give us an update on where you're at? I know I have a few questions, and we'll go round table with the board.
Yes. So I wanted to keep this as brief as possible, but just to make sure that we were available, the Trails Committee, to answer any questions about the bylaw. We went back and forth with General Counsel on a few points, and I understand from a communication with Mark, we had to push back on one item, and I just wanted the board to understand why we did that and what specific item that was, and to ensure that that doesn't jeopardize your support of the article. I also wanted to understand if it was possible. Are you guys taking a position tonight on the article, or will this be one that you punt and take a position at town meeting?
So we're going to discuss the articles as we go later in the night. I mean, if the board, certainly while you're here, if the board's ready to take a position, Catherine, we can certainly do that.
Sure. Great. So yeah, do you want me to point you to where I'm referring to in the article?
Yes.
That we changed? Okay, great. So, under purpose, section 935, it's the third sentence where it starts, this bylaw establishes a committee that will be responsible for the trails in the town. The initial bylaw that the general counsel had reviewed stopped there. The sentence ended. And so where we pushed back was we added through licensing agreements or easements, as defined below in section 9.36 functions. And the reason we pushed back on this, and we were very specific with, and by the way, we really appreciate Jay's, the general counsel's feedback, and we're very grateful of all the time he spent with us on this. But the reason we push back is because we received specific feedback from the Stewardship Committee as well as the Southborough Open Land Foundation. Both entities were concerned that by ending the sentence with trails, period, that it wasn't clearly defined what trails Southborough Trails Committee would have access to maintain. So even though we tried to explain it's defined below, we felt like, and so did the entities, that this was clarifying language that would help meet that middle ground that the other stakeholders had concerns. So that was the reason we did that. It wasn't to just push back for the sake of pushing back. We were literally trying to make sure the entities we're working with and partnering with feel comfortable about the bylaw.
Okay. Thank you for that clarification. We'll go round table, see if anyone has any questions or comments for you. We'll start with, I have a few, but we'll start with Ms. Malinowski.
Thank you. Hi, Kat. How are you? So I was not, and I'm still not in agreement on the associate member language, unfortunately. So I will not be supporting this article, not to kind of cut to the chase here. But just a few other comments, Kat. I mean, that's really my kind of big hang up, as we've discussed before. But I think, looking at some of the language that Mr. Hegarty's article had, and I know that he's pulled it in, the hopes that we can kind of clean it up and have it be at a higher level for a fall town meeting. Just kind of questioning the some of the information that's listed in here and the definitions that are listed in here, and if we should be looking to do it at a more at a higher level for the town. So, for example, like the definition of a quorum. I think somewhere in here it said that you need to be a registered voter to be on trails, but you don't need to be a registered voter to be an associate member. So just, I think that that's more specific than probably we have in our general town bylaws right now. I think some boards and committees in our town bylaws have that you need to be a registered voter, but at the high level, you don't. So is there a specific reason why certain boards or committees are defining themselves to have to be registered voters versus not? So that's just some of my kind of general, and it's kind of outside of it relates to this article, Kat, but I think it's also kind of talking about how do we standardize things so that every time, a ad hoc committee wants to become standing, we're not going through kind of this individualized process.
Yeah, I totally agree. So just a little note on so this was language, kind of default language that came to us, drafted. So we did reach out to Mr. Hegarty 3 times to invite him to help us redraft this in a way that would be more in line with what he was thinking, and denied each time. So the one thing about the registered voters, and I'm completely in agreement with standardizing the bylaws to ensure that everyone is, consistent. So if down the road some of this gets changed, we're not gonna be upset about that, except for associate members. I would like to have more discussion about that, just because of the benefits that it really brings, and because other towns are using it, and we've already, cleared that open meeting law is no longer an issue and those types of things. So, but with the whole idea about not having a registered voter need for the associate member, it's more inclusive of people who might be permanent residents who can't be registered voters. So that's one piece. But if the whole registered voter thing went away, I mean, that's more inclusive as well. So we're fine with that. So we're not gonna.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I guess I would go on the more inclusive side.
Yeah.
But
we're totally fine with that. And in all honesty, like, it was language that came to us and we just were like, okay, so it's not, we can change it in the future.
Okay.
But
there wasn't a reason why you put it in there.
Not specifically, no.
Okay.
And I've been told we're not making any more changes unless you guys give permission to tonight. So
just one other question on why you're doing 2-year terms.
Yeah, good question. So 2-year terms, it's, again, it's default language. So it's one of those things that we're sticking around. The committee members are, most of us have been on the committee for multiple years. It just makes it easier. The 1-year term specifically for the associate members, it gives them an opportunity to try out. They don't have to have a longer commitment.
Okay. I'm not aware, and maybe there are other boards and committees that are standing that are 2-year terms. I think that the standard that I've seen is 3. So I was just wondering what the rationale was. Okay, thank you. That's all I have.
Yeah.
Mr. Healy.
Hi, Kat, how are you? 2 things. Number 1, actually number 2, I'll do 2 first because it's quick. I owe you a phone call about CSX, and I was gone for a week or so. So I will return that phone call.
Great. That is time sensitive if you're open to, if you have scheduled flexibility tomorrow or something.
Yeah, I'll give you a call tomorrow. All right. Second, just generally, and Jim Haggerty called me when he was talking about his article, and he asked me the question about registered voters. And I guess my view on it is, somebody's a productive member of the Southborough Society, but for legal reasons, they're unable to be a registered voter. I understand why that's the case. But I think that they can be a productive member of Southborough Society on the trails and any other committee. So that's my view on it.
Yeah, I mean, would you guys mind if we changed that and just took it out?
I would encourage you to change it.
Yeah, I would too.
So I just got permission from the select board to take that out.
Permission? I'm not sure if you need permission, but I think at least I'm in agreement with taking it out. I get both sides of it, but my view is that again, you're a productive member of the Southborough community, then you're a productive member of the community, and whether or not you can vote is irrelevant.
See, and really this came to us as some default language, thinking that might be the way it is. So that's more of, like that just came to us. So we're happy to take that out. We can also, because I think Mr. Hegarty also brought up the question about whether you were an employee of the town. He had a really great example of someone who had a background, but they're an employee of the town. I didn't know if that might be related to more of a conflict of interest, if you're an employee of the town and serving on a committee, if there's any kind of issue there. But if that's not an issue with the select board, we'll take that out too.
So actually, my view is that, I'm sorry, go ahead, Lisa.
No, I was just going to say that was one of my concerns as well, because there are employees that live in town that are currently serving. I mean, we have them on the assessors, on one of the trust funds. Okay. So that was one of the concerns I had as well.
I guess my view on that, Kat, is that you wouldn't want Brian Ballantyne, if he lived in Southborough, being on the advisory committee, for instance. But it's very specific. So
Right.
off with their heads. I take that off too.
I just used that term the other day. So I guess I have a question because the Trails Committee has to vote on this, and I hate to ask this question. What's the deadline for going to print, Mr. Purple?
The original deadline or the new deadline?
No, the new deadline.
You know, you go on vacation and everything changes. So the selectmen are meeting, the selectmen are scheduled to meet next week to, finally sign the final warrant. But I mean, quite honestly, this is the select board's article. If you wanted to change something, you can change something.
Without the committee's vote?
Yes.
Are you sure?
Yeah,
yeah, very.
We are the sponsor.
We are the
Okay,
sponsor.
I'm playing by the rules, and there's lots of different theories going around, and I'm trying to get the right information to make sure that we're doing the right thing. And I don't want to go against what the committee wants, but I know the committee wants this to work, and we've been very flexible and open to the feedback. So I think that, if this select board would like to take those items out, then I'm fairly certain no one's going to object on the committee. Okay, great. That's awesome. And then, so you're meeting next, so then that means we can make the change tonight and circulate it, right? And that be the final one. Great. Because I've been
I'm all
waiting.
done.
Okay. Thank you, Marty. Mr. Stivers.
Thank you. Thanks, Kat, as usual. Great progress on this. And first, I agree with the clarification that we started with in terms of the issues from SOLF and trustees and so forth there. I think that's helpful clarification. I am also in agreement in terms of lessening the restriction on membership here. So I think that's good sense. And I know folks, for example, who are not U.S. citizens, who are, again, very capable, productive members of the town and pay taxes and so forth, and could be very helpful in these kind of roles. So I have no problem with all of that. On a higher level, I've had some conversations with Mr. Hegarty where I actually am moderately in disagreement with him about his standardization process. I think that's useful. On the other hand, I think it's helpful to have a standardization, but have considerable flexibility for different committees to do things somewhat differently depending on the committee needs. So I'm not at all bothered by winding up with, half the committees being consistent and the others making changes in terms of some of these administrative details to meet their own particular needs. So, and I know that's certainly not Mr. Hegarty's view, but reasonable people can disagree. And I think that's where I am with them on this one. So we'll deal with that one down the road here, but that's sort of my high level view. But again, sounds great. And I think I hope we're in position to vote to support this tonight. Thank you.
Mr. Dennington.
Yes, I agree with taking out registered voter. You could just say each voting member shall be a resident of the town and then end it there. And, fortunately, this has been on our radar screen for a couple months. So we've talked about it before, and I'm also prepared to support it.
Okay, thank you. So, Kat, unfortunately, I'm still hung up on the associate as well. And I was actually a little bit more confused when I read this. In looking that the select board may, in consultation with the committee, appoint non-voting associate members to assist it in performing its functions. But then down below, you talk about the subject of legal requirements as may be imposed by the select board. The committee may coordinate and enlist volunteers, which is, I'm still seeing that as what the associate does under the supervision and direction of the committee, assist it with the work on the trails, including clearing, mowing, building, monitoring, and maintenance tasks. So I'm not seeing a clear definition between why we're having volunteers and why we're having associate members. So that was, go ahead. I mean, if you want to address that,
Sure. No, I understand. So the enlist volunteers is currently in our current charge. So that's always been something the Trails Committee can do, enlist volunteers to help maintain the trails. The associate members are a more committed level of volunteers, essentially. Like we had mentioned before, Trails Committee is one of 3 committees that requires manual labor outside of their monthly meetings. It takes a lot of work to maintain the trails. Spring, summer, and fall, a lot of times we'll go out there, do it ourselves. organizing work parties takes a long time. We don't always have the bandwidth to do that. And those spring, summer, and fall, a lot of people were gone. So having a few extra hands that are committed to the committee, really beneficial. So that's really what it is. They already know what's going on. They're familiar with the trails. They're covered on their liability. It's all good stuff. So that's really why, that's what we're doing. And yeah.
And just to further clarify, I mean, we have associate members set up for ZBA, and their role is to step in, and potentially serve as need be. So again, I just think having associates with very different definitions is just something I have an issue with. So I will leave it at that. But I do have a couple other quick comments. You talk about what the town administrator may provide or arrange for support, including but not limited to purchasing assistance. That whole paragraph, that's kind of a general. I'm just wondering why the committee felt the need to clarify that. Obviously, the town administrator would be involved in purchasing, obtaining resources from department heads or access to legal services. That's something that's kind of a given. So I'm just curious why the need to spell that out was in there.
Yep. So this is under.
I'm sorry, 9.35C organization. Sorry.
Yeah. So it's essentially. So it is standard. Actually, was this something that came up? I'm just thinking back to another conversation in stewardship. It came up. It's basically stating what is, like you said, it's just putting it in writing that what committees are essentially entitled to. So it's not giving us any more than what is normally written. Yeah.
Okay. So I guess for consistency, I was just wondering, because it's not in everyone, but not everything, as Sam said, not everything has to be consistent.
Yeah,
So,
and I understand the question, but if it doesn't raise flags and the council didn't think it was an issue, it's not granting us any more, anything else other than any other committee, commission, or board. And it says may provide, which is very different than shall provide, as we all know now.
okay. My next one is on 9.36. The first paragraph, the duty shall be to create, enhance, extend, monitor, and maintain trails on public property within the town, exclusive of land that's regulated by another board or committee. What about, how does DCR fall into that? Because I mean, is that technically, I don't view that as public property.
Right. So the reason it says on public property within the town, exclusive of land that's exclusively regulated by another board, that was specifically put in there to help clarify so that we're not working on stewardship trails and we're not working on other trails, right? So your question is, how does that apply to DCR?
Yeah.
Because that's public land. So let's see, shall create on public land.
Unless I missed it and you've addressed it somewhere else in there. But I just want to,
go ahead.
I want to make sure that, again, whether I support this or not, Kat, but all, that all bases are covered and that you don't limit yourself to just public property, again. And maybe you view DCR as that. I don't know. I'm just asking.
No, I think where DCR is covered is in, I'm looking at a line item. So it's the second paragraph underneath it starts, the committee may be charged with responsibility for trail monitoring and maintenance obligations under any licensing agreements and easements to which the town is or becomes a party to. That paragraph is essentially allowing us to work within DCR and with the licenses that we have. So does that help answer that question?
It does. It does to some level. So, okay. So those were my questions. I'm in support of the registered voter. Also, I think taking that off, there's, there are people that just don't register to vote for whatever reason. I mean,
yeah, and it was never our intent to be exclusive. So please don't take that as, it was just default language that kind of came with. And if you noticed, I don't know if you did, but we took Mr. Hegarty's article before it was pulled and put it next to our article and removed the quorum. So we matched his quorum. And we also removed a section that was a little confusing about removing the right to remove members. So we were trying to match what he wanted to do as far as standardizing as an effort to meet middle ground. And then just a quick comment. I know I won't convince you how amazing associate members will be for us and how it's working out so well. But when I brought up the associate members to the general counsel to, he never mentioned anything about an issue, a conflict with ZBA. And then I brought that point to him. He's like, it's not, even though there's two different ones, it shouldn't be an issue because the bylaw especially specifically defines what an associate member is. So he didn't have a concern. You know, we brought this before the Attorney General's office and just making sure that open meeting law was covered. We put a member conduct policy in place. I mean, we've met with 8 different boards and commissions and talked to them and got feedback, and we are doing our due diligence. So I really hope that you guys see that, and we want this to work. And we understand that you're taking a position against associate members, but it's such a good thing for trails and for maybe stewardship and maybe open space too. But, you know, for us, it's really great. And I'm not speaking for them, so that's not on the record. But I just want you to know that we've done our due diligence to try to make the case and try to take your feedback. So if there is any heart that you want to change your mind, you know, and if it becomes a problem, I'll be the first one to come before the select board and say, I am sorry, we want to change our bylaws so that it's, you know, takes away any issues. But
And Kat, my concerns on associate member have nothing to do with the amount of work that you guys do or even have done in your due diligence. It's just, I have a concern in general about it. And I wish I could say between now and town meeting, my mind could be changed because I would love to support it because I support everything else. You know, it's just, again, I feel very strongly about it. So, so I guess based on that, I mean, the board can take a position tonight. I mean, I don't know, Chelsea, again, you and I seem to be, one second, Andrew, on the opposite side of this. We can wait.
Yeah, I mean, I hate to vote against it, but that's obviously the crux of what Trails is trying to do. And I give them a lot of credit for, you know, putting the amount of work of research and outreach into it. So yeah, I'm fine to take a position.
Okay. Andrew? Sorry, Chelsea, I didn't mean to cut you off.
I know we're going around. I don't know if you, if Sam and Marty wait on this yet, or I'm embarrassing myself that they did substantively comment. No, I forgot what they said, but no, the last time we talked about it, generally, Sam and Marty were okay with the associate members, right?
I just assumed
are you
that
guys
didn't change.
still in the same position?
Yeah, I assumed it didn't change, Andrew.
And then do you also agree that the only change you would make would be to 935A, take out a registered voter in the town and remove the requirement that he can't be a town officer or employee, just make it a town resident?
Yes, and I would take out under associate members, but not need to be registered voters. I don't think that matters. I think just being a resident for consistency.
Okay,
And,
so then
add the clarification that Kat suggested at the start of the conversation.
which one was that?
Oh, that was under the third sentence under purpose.
Oh.
It was just the last, is that what you're referring to, Sam? This
Right,
is the through licensing agreements or easements as defined below in section 9.36 functions.
You want to keep the language which is in.
Yeah.
Okay. So then.
But I wanted you to know that the general counsel, that we pushed back a little bit on we pushed back on the general counsel on that piece. I wanted full transparency.
But there's no changes based on the last
That
version.
stays in, yeah.
Okay, so then
Yeah.
I move that the select board support at town meeting Article 30 on the condition that in section 9.35A, the second sentence be amended to require only that each voting member shall be a resident of the town. And in the last sentence of 935A, to remove the reference in the final sentence to but need not be registered voters.
I'll second the motion.
Okay, roll call. Mr. Stivers,
Aye.
Mr. Healy,
Aye.
Mr. Dennington,
Aye.
Ms. Malinowski,
No.
and Ms. Brascio, no. Okay. Thank you, Kat. Thank you again.
Thank you. So I'll circulate this tonight to you, Mr. Purple, and Lisa. Is that who wants
I
it?
think we've got the changes, Mark. I think you
Yeah,
can just
I'm all
update.
set with the
You're gonna-
changes.
Oh, good.
Yep. Yep.
Okay, so then I'll go forth and get more votes. Thank you, guys. Have a
All right,
good night.
Kat, thank you so much. Have a great night. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
All right, next up, reports. I have no chair's report. We have a member's report. Andrew, update on MBTA communities letter.
Very simple update. The letter that we discussed was completed and sent with the changes that we discussed at the last meeting. Mimi Luttrell was very helpful in working with me to get the letter completed and presented to the planning board. So that's good. And the letter as sent is in the packet. That's it.
Perfect, Andrew. Thank you. Town Administrator report, Mr. Purple.
Madam Chair, I'll try to be quick. There are two quick items that I had listed on the agenda. The first one is the statewide opioid settlement. I put some information in the packet. I'm not going to go through it. Simply to say that there's a statewide settlement through the Attorney General's office, and any funds received through the settlement will be distributed back to communities. We did put in our claim, so to speak, for any funding that does come back. It does need to be spent on certain things in order to reduce substance abuse, things like that. My initial knee jerk is public safety and youth and family services. You'll notice that over the course from 2022 2038, it could result in about $457,000 that we could apply back towards reducing substance abuse and things of that nature in our community. So there's some information in your package. You can take a look at more of the details. The one piece that I thought was interesting is, and Ms. McAuliffe will love it, is there's an additional reporting requirement for any monies received. So we can, once CARES disappears, something else takes its place. And the only other piece I just wanted to give an update on.
Excuse me, Mark. I think
Yes.
Sam had a question.
I'm sorry. Yes.
Should Board of Health not be in that loop as well? With public safety and youth and family services, I would think that there might be some overlap there.
Like I said, I mean, my mention of the two departments was not meant to be inclusive or exclusive.
Okay.
Obviously, you take a look at what can be spent, and I think that that a lot of those things, prevention, education, and things like that, can be done through Board of Health as well. So
Okay,
I think that's someplace we could definitely apply the funds.
Okay, thanks.
The only other item I want to update you on a little bit is to circle back to in-person meetings. I've had a directive from the chair that before she leaves the seat, she would like to get back in person. And so we are looking to try to make that happen. I know Board of Health has helped to pave the way. They've recently voted to allow boards and committees to meet in person without restrictions. But I think they did keep the caveat that meetings need to be still approved by the town administrator. I still do get I still get requests. Most of these are small meetings, Board of Assessors, Council on Aging, the Accessibility Committee. That's really all I think that's meeting in person at this point. As you know, the town meeting is obviously, the restrictions have been, lifted to simply be, to people's comfort levels in terms of masks and distancing. We've also been having conversations with Sam about, what their level is to get back to doing some of the things they were doing before, and those conversations are ongoing. We have on premise and have been testing the OWL. Extremely intuitive little device, and really been impressed. Ms. Braccio made the mistake of stopping by the other day, and we made her demo certain spots and everything, and that's just to see. It does react, and Ms. Malinowski will enjoy this. It does interact very well with people on Zoom, and bringing people into the room, making them apparent when they're speaking, but not focusing on them when they're not. All of the volume comes through the OWL. And it really seems to do a nice job. We're just having some additional meetings. I know Mr. Montijo is having a meeting tomorrow morning to try to get a better sense of how that's going to work upstairs. We also want to understand how it's going to translate in the public safety training room, possibly a meeting room at the library and also at the senior center. I think that was the conversation that we've had previously, is that, we did purchase a unit out of the IT budget for this year, and that we would consider possibly ARPA funds if we're looking to outfit our other spaces. But I really think that this is something that's going to be very beneficial for us. It allows people, I think, intuitively to be able to start meetings, end meetings. They automatically are done by Zoom. They upload to our YouTube site. It's really going to be, something good. So hopefully there'll be more information coming in the next couple of weeks as to an actual date. But again, the chair has given us April 26th as the target date to get back in person. I know Mr. Healy's been looking to get back in person too, and he's got a limited number of meetings. So I'll see if we can satisfy as many people as possible with that. So that's all I have, Madam Chair.
All right, great. Thank you, Mark. I will add, it was pretty impressive from the test that we did. And I think it's going to work great. And I think it's going to satisfy the public's want for us to continue, to do hybrid meetings and, also to be able to use the Zoom features. So much appreciated. Thank you, Mark. Consent agenda. We only have 3 items left. Does anyone want to hold A? Okay. Okay, perfect. B?
I'll just speak to that for a minute, Lisa.
Okay, so we'll hold that one. And C? All right, then do we have a motion to appoint the truck driver for Public Works Water Department effective, I messed up, effective,
April 19th.
thank you, April 19th.
So move.
Thank you. Is there a second? Thank
Second.
you. Roll call. Mr. Stivers,
Aye.
Mr. Dennington,
Aye.
Ms. Malinowski,
Aye.
Mr. Healy,
Aye.
and Ms. Brascio, aye. Sam, let's do B quickly, and then we'll go to the minutes. Chelsea, if you wanted to speak to this.
Yeah, sure. So I had a chance to touch base with Ms. Reynolds regarding the Route 9 Business Corridor EEA grant. And she was kind enough to put together a draft letter to be sent out from the board just to kind of kick off the project and get all the stakeholders on the same page. So that should be going out shortly, and a meeting will be scheduled too. So just encouraging boards and committees to participate from the beginning on this project. And we'll be getting at a minimum quarterly updates from Ms. Reynolds on the project plan and where she's at. So just wanted to let you know that that's going on.
Okay, any discussion? I don't see none. All right, do we have a motion to approve the letter from the select board to begin Route 9 Business Corridor EEA grant project?
So move.
Second.
Is there a second? Thank you. Roll call. Mr. Stivers,
Aye.
Mr. Dennington,
Aye.
Ms. Malinowski,
Aye.
Mr. Healy,
Aye.
and Ms. Brascio, aye. And thank you, Chelsea, for coordinating that. All right, Mr. Stivers, minutes. Why don't we start with February 28th?
No comment on the 28th.
Okay, anyone else on the 28th? Okay, how about either 28th, Sam?
28th with planning board and Shopsy. Yeah.
Okay,
is-
go
I've
ahead.
got a couple of comments.
Go right ahead.
Line 137, there's an extra 155 in there that needs to be removed. And in line 149, I would say similarly instead of similar. And that's it for the 28th with planning board and Shopsy for me. I don't know if anybody else has comments.
Does anyone else? Thank you, Sam. Does anyone else have? Andrew, I see you're shuffling.
Yes.
I do the same
Okay.
thing, so you're good.
I hope Sam didn't already mention this. Line 122.
No.
Nope.
Okay, it's just, I think that affordable housing there should be not capitalized after the comma. Just make it lowercase. It actually did affect the meaning of the sentence, I think, so. Yeah, no. Yeah, okay,
Was that the only one, Andrew?
that's it.
Okay, and then March 24th.
24th, I had 1 point, line 83, Martell has 1 L.
Okay.
That's it.
Okay.
Major editorial comment.
Andrew, did you have any on that?
We're talking about the most recent ones.
March 24th.
Yeah.
Okay, in all honesty, I have not reviewed those yet. I think those came out fairly.
Do you want us to hold that till the
Today.
12th?
Yeah.
Okay, we can hold that one. That's fine. And you can review it. That's fine. We'll do a consent. So.
That wasn't in the first packet, right? It came out
No.
later.
Yeah.
Correct. Okay, so do we have a motion to approve open session meeting minutes, February 28th, 2022 morning and February 28th, 2022 joint meeting with planning board as edited?
So move.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you. Roll call. Mr. Stivers,
Aye.
Mr. Dennington,
Aye.
Ms. Malinowski,
Aye.
Mr. Healy,
Aye.
and Ms. Braccio. Aye. Great. Thank you very much. Next item is we're going back to the budget update. So from our last meeting, we had with advisory, there were a few questions. ADA was one regarding initially the request was 5,000, increasing the budget from 2,500 to 5,000 and a 50,000. Mark, do you want to give us an update on where that fell with ADA? I know they've taken a different position.
Sure,
How's
I've had a lot of email correspondence with Mrs. Faniff, the chair of the committee. So the initial request, and Ms. Braccio, correct me if I get this wrong, because there was a lot of moving parts. The budget for the ADA committee, now the Southborough Public Accessibility Committee, was established at $2,500 when it was first created 2 years ago. Nothing has been spent from that 2,500 each year. That always has been returned back at the end of the fiscal year to free cash. This year, the request was to increase it to $5,000 because the committee was going to be more active. They're now up and running, and if they needed money, they wanted to have that available. And so my pushback was, you haven't spent anything of any of the funds that you've had of the 2,500. So you really have no history to basically tell us whether or not 2,500 is too much, too little, and to request doubling it, in a fiscal year. My understanding is that they now have withdrawn the 5,000 and now they're okay with the 2,500 for the coming fiscal year. The second piece is there was a they had additionally requested $50,000 from ARPA and had wanted a fund to be able to address issues as they may arise. And this is different than the $50,000 that this board has supported, as well as capital has supported, to begin to address some of the issues identified in the ADA self-evaluation and transition plan. And that has now changed to there is a residual amount that is left from the ADA self-evaluation transition plan funding from town meeting. It originally was $40,000. After all the work that was done, the grant that was used and everything else, there's a residual of $10,000 in that fund. Public Accessibility Committee would like to repurpose that $10,000 at an upcoming town meeting to be able to use to help them conduct some studies to evaluate some properties and or projects in town for accessibility concerns and recommendations for remediation. So I'm not sure that the board, wants to take a position on doing something prospective like that. You certainly can. That $10,000 is not, that article is not included in the capital articles that we're closing out at town meeting. So that option does remain open to you. So I think that there was a lot of sound and fury, but at the end of the day, I think that the budget is pretty much staying at the $2,500 level that it currently is requested at.
Okay, thank you, Mark. Yeah, that summed it up well. So as far as the 10,000 goes, that will be, if there's a fall town meeting, that will be part of the fall town meeting, and we'll have plenty of time to have the SPAC in and have further discussions on that. So as far as the concerns that I brought up at our last meeting, the budget is staying the same at 2,500. I don't have an issue with that. I don't know if anyone does. I know this was one of the held items. Andrew, Sam, I'm seeing kind of go ahead, Sam.
Question. I guess I'm still a little confused about the $50,000. Now, is there still a request in from the Accessibility Committee to the ARPA group to say, we're looking for money to start catching up on some of the recommendations from the facilities study, accessibility study. Because I'm supportive of some money going in that direction to continue that process that our facilities group has started on a sort of filler kind of basis as they get resources to do that. But I think we need to take a more active step there. So is that still in play, or where does that stand?
Do you want me to go, Mark? I'm happy
Yeah,
to.
it's
So
like
Sam,
like a standoff. Go ahead.
yeah, so it's currently still there, but I think that the trade-off at this point was they wanted it in the budget.
Yeah.
So I think at this point, and Mark, keep me honest on this, their plan is to repurpose the 10,000 to satisfy the need through 2023. Is that fair, Mark?
Yeah, I think that's fair. They would look to, if we have a fall town meeting, they'd look to repurpose that in the fall. If we don't have a meeting until the next, the annual in the following May, they'd look to repurpose it then.
Okay.
So the original request from 50 is now down to
10.
repurposing the 10.
Okay.
The 10.
All right. I guess I see it as a separate issue. That I'm still personally in favor of something like 50 out of the ARPA money to start catching up on the substantial deficit that was identified by the facilities accessibility study. So, but that's a separate issue now. I understand.
Okay.
Thanks.
So you're good with the 2,500 for
Yeah,
88.
yeah.
Okay, so we can check that one off. Chelsea, do you want to touch on MTC? I know you've had
Yes.
conversations and you held this one, so.
I did. Yes. So I had a nice conversation with Matt Probst today, and I now understand why it doesn't make sense to consolidate all of the survey monkeys in town, because it ends up costing more. So I agree with the approach. And what the version that he's asking for is more dynamic. And so I don't know if you've all received any feedback on the town survey, but that people were falling asleep and it was taking a long time to do. So I totally appreciate his comments on wanting to get a more dynamic survey so that we can hopefully get a better completion rate on it. And so I did discuss with him actually moving the expense into the IT budget versus the MTC budget, and he was fine with that. So if we can just move $1,500 out of the MTC budget into the IT budget.
Okay, thank you. Everyone,
So move.
okay, in agreement on that? Okay, I don't know that we need a motion quite yet on that, but I think we're gonna take it on the budget as a whole.
It
'cause
was
we're
it
almost
was
there.
sitting there in the middle of the room.
I know.
Good
We're
try.
almost there, Marty. Chelsea, you held EDC. Do you want to touch on that?
I did, yeah. So their minute taker has been paid out of the consulting line. I know there was some back and forth with the EDC coordinator. They did not lower their budget when the minute taker policy was put into place. So I feel like they're appointed by us. And I think that they should follow our lead on adopting a policy and adjusting their budget accordingly. So I would recommend that we reduce EDC's budget by $1,000.
Sorry, discussion.
Yeah, I guess I'm in favor, as I have been, of more flexibility and support for various committees. I think EDC is one of them, so I would actually not be in favor of that, but.
Well, and just to that point, I thought that in her narrative back that Marika said that the EDC never specifically allocated money in the FY 20, 21, or 22 budgets for a recording secretary. So what I understand is that she's not saying of the $10,000 contracted services item for FY 22, that $10,000 wasn't set based on using a recording secretary, although that they have used that to pay.
That's what they pay it out of. Yeah.
Mhm.
So it's not an individual line item in their contracted services, but that's where they pay their recording secretary out of. And when the budget was originally put together, our policy was not in place.
Yeah.
So I just think on principle.
Can we
I
just
have an
make it clear that they can't do that? I mean, I don't have a problem with the budget number. It's pretty modest. But Mark, if for a note taker, what paper comes through for them to get paid?
I mean, they get put through the same way through the payroll. So it goes through with the same sign-offs.
I mean, just make it clear to EDC well, at least my view is I'm fine with the budget number, but I'm also fine from a consistency standpoint. I disagree with Sam on this, although I understand the flexibility argument, that it not be used for recording minutes. And understanding that if they submit it, it's not going to get approved.
But I think my concern, Marty, is that when they originally put the budget together, there must have been some assumption that they were going to have a recording secretary in FY23. And when that policy was adopted, they left that amount in there. And like historical uses contracted services for minute takers, right? They had, I don't know, $3,000 in their budget, something like that. And when we adopted the policy, they amended their budget to reduce it. Right. So I think it's just, I don't think that they're going to put in for a recording secretary, but again, I don't want to argue over $1,000, but I feel like they're appointed by us. And I just think on principle, I think it's more of a slush fund than anything else.
And I agree on that point, Chelsea.
No, it's not a slush fund.
I agree specifically though, on that point. We've had historical lowered. They were one of the minute takers that were taken and they've lowered it. They could have kept their budget. Right. They just did it. So, and if this money was there and it was being used for minute takers all along, I agree with Chelsea. I think based on principle, we should lower it, but.
I'm for flexibility, so it doesn't bother me, but hey.
Sam, I thought you just said in the meeting earlier that you were cheap.
That's right, I am.
I just think it sets a bad, we've asked
Right,
others.
I move that did we vote on my previous motion or is it still sitting out there?
It's because again, it wasn't changing the budget, so we just left it. That's why.
Okay, all right, fair enough. This one, I move that we approve the EDC budget at a reduction of $1,000.
Second. Okay. Roll call. Mr. Stivers.
Aye.
Mr. Dennington.
Aye.
Ms. Malinowski.
Aye.
Mr. Healy.
Now, see, now I'll do a congressional thing. Now I'll vote nay. I'll have made the motion. No, I vote aye.
All right, and Ms. Brascio, aye. And you know what, Righty, you're right. We should have made a motion and for consistency, to move the MTC over to the IT budget. I know it's just thank you. All right. Mr. Healy, you get a second? Thank you. All right, roll call. Mr. Stivers.
Aye.
Mr. Dennington.
Aye.
Ms. Malinowski.
Aye.
Mr. Healy.
Aye.
Ms. Brascio, aye. Okay. For consistency purposes, thank you. That takes us to planning. Ms. Malinowski again.
So I did get a chance to read through Karina's explanations. And my so same kind of theory. And I just think in general, we have some different philosophies going on with budgeting approaches. And I understand trying to be reasonable, but if there's a department that needs to have something done, like I would like them to bring it forward and have a discussion rather than just reallocating funds after we cut something else. So that's just kind of a general comment, especially for another elected board. But my one concern about where they reallocated the funds to was on the 1700 for the zoning map. And it specifically says that that's not enough money to do the zoning map. So my concern is, how much does the total project cost for this? And secondly, if it's not enough money, are we allocating money in FY23 for something that can't potentially be done because we don't have enough money to do it in FY23? So those are kind of my two comments related to the planning board request. But again, they don't report in, they're not appointed by us, they're an elected board. So I'm not gonna make a motion to reduce their budget, but I do have concerns around kind of how we're budgeting in general and kind of the process that we're going through.
And Chelsea, did you ask for clarity?
I did, and I did not get a response from Karina yet. I asked her what the overall cost was for the zoning map, because if it's greater than $10,000, it goes through another process. So I just want to make sure that if we're agreeing to something, but I did not get. But I just emailed her today.
Okay, and I don't think she was in the office today, so.
Okay.
I think that's a good question. I guess we have a couple options. We could, I mean, I'd like to close out as much of the budget piece as we can tonight. We can tentatively, I mean, we're meeting on the 12th. We could agree to it in the budget tonight, and then on the 12th, just have a general quick discussion. One second, Andrew. I'll come to you next. And just have a general discussion, and maybe the explanation is enough. And at that point, if we need to adjust something, we can. But I think just to move the process forward, I'm okay. I have the same questions that Chelsea has. So I'd like to get clarity. Go ahead, Andrew.
So I have another question on
Sure.
Karina's response back about $1,500 for bylaw amendment support services, including part of it is advertising costs, possibly materials supporting ATM presentation for bylaw amendments. I guess, did anyone else have a concern about, is this, I mean, because we've had this discussion before with other boards about using town funds to advocate for the passage of something at a town meeting, which I thought you're not supposed to do that. And again, this one, on the other hand, this is kind of like on the border because obviously if we want to help support technical assistance in implementing some of the recommendations of the master plan, particularly about zoning updates. So I was just curious if other people had a concern about that too. And I vaguely recall there's one other budget this year that had that same issue too. For a small amount of money.
It was planning. It was planning.
Oh, it's planning. Okay.
Yep.
Because this is like the third time we've encountered this issue.
Let me offer a suggestion then, Andrew. Let's try to get clarity on both of those points. We can approve the budget if we are agreement on all the other line items except this, subject to getting clarification on these. And then I mean, we've shut the door, then there's only one thing left.
That's the planning board budget.
The planning board budget. But again, we have a couple more to go through quick, but so I don't have an issue with where we end up. If this is the only questions we have are on this budget, getting clarification before we take the final vote to add, to support this amount in the budget. Sam?
Lisa, to Andrew's point, I think, Andrew, I would draw a distinction between explanation of a particular article and endorsement or, supporting the article necessarily. So that's a fine line to distinguish.
So then maybe instead of saying supporting,
yeah,
explaining.
Yeah. So.
And we can ask the question, Sam. We'd be happy to do that, Andrew. And Chelsea, you've already asked on the 17th. So is the board good with just leaving this one out there hanging for the moment? Let's see, there's still a couple more and see where we end up. Next was library. And I know there's been a couple discussions that have taken place regarding the hotspots, and I'm actually okay in the overall with it. I know, I believe advisory may not be pushing the envelope on this one either. So it's up to the board if we want to stick to the 1,100, taking it out. I'm actually fine with leaving it in and getting the data, taking a look at it again next year.
I support it.
I support it.
Okay.
Keeping it the same.
Keeping it in at this point. So that leads us to only one last concern that we had with difference we had with advisory was the $50,000 that they're looking to take out of the all of the salary out of the Board of Health. I think they made a pretty compelling case. The Board of Health did. We've talked about phasing in staff. I think the nurse is something that's going to be there for a long time. So I'm still in support of keeping it the way we did it. And I will say advisory may have an issue and may make an amendment on town meeting floor. which is certainly their right to do. But I think Board of Health made a very compelling case. I know, Chelsea, you're not going to speak to this, but I think Board of Health made a very compelling case for me, and I think for the rest of the board when they were here as well. So I'm fine with leaving that as is in the budget. So Sam, you said you're good as well. Andrew?
In the budget, I think that's where it belongs, yeah.
Okay, Andrew?
Yeah, I think it's something that we've already decided. I still have kind of
Yep.
mixed feelings and rather, but we've already decided it. And it's a significant amount of money to change our minds about it at this point. So,
Okay, Marty?
Yeah, I've been there for a while. I'm with Board of Health on this.
Okay, so basically, we are good as far as the budget goes for the warrant, except for planning board. And Mr. Purple, would you like us to, knowing planning board's hanging out, we can certainly take a motion to support all the budgets as presented, short of planning, just looking for further clarification, and we'll take a position on that on the 12th, or would you rather us just wait? I mean, I think we've tied up everything else.
You want to know what I'd like? I mean, I'd love for you to close this all out tonight because staff has got to put this together. And we've got to prepare this to go into the warrant because it looks different in the warrant than it does as you've been looking at it in detail. So, you know, I understand you've got one thing hanging out but there's really nothing we can do until you're all done.
So my only concern with that, Mark, is taking a position tonight, and then on the 12th, if we still have concerns with the answer, then you're going to have to go back and make changes anyway.
So you're not going to have a fully formed warrant on the 12th then? Because there's going to, you're not going to be able to see the
Okay.
budget all sitting in there because I don't want to go through the effort of doing it when we've got the potential of some changes that'll need to be made that can't easily be tweaked. Because it has to go in as pictures in here rather than as something that can be amended on the fly.
Lisa,
Go ahead, Chelsea.
I even depending on what I still want to get an answer on planning board, but if they're not going to reduce their budget, I wouldn't make a motion to reduce their budget. I don't know how the rest of the board feels. So
Yep.
maybe it's not worth waiting for
Okay.
$3,600.
I'm okay with moving ahead too with it.
Okay.
And then let the planning board sort it out.
You know
Okay.
what? I'm fine moving ahead too, except that that's my bottom line. I'm fine moving ahead. But, and Mark, I'm not quite sure how we do this. I mean, both the advisory committee and the board and the select board have responsibility to support or not support various boards, committees, departments, et cetera, budgets. And geez, another elected board in town should provide us with the answers and the numbers we need so we're not in this position. I mean, it's very, I find it frustrating. So I'm not sure what can be done except that make it clear next time around to everybody that if we don't get answers to specific questions, that we're not, again, I'm not going to be on the select board, but I certainly would take the position that I'm just not going to support you. If you can't answer questions about your budget to our satisfaction, just basic arithmetic questions where the money is being spent, then we're not going to support it, period. Anyway, that's my tirade.
Okay, well, I think in some level of fairness, Chelsea asked the question, the 1,700 today, correct, Chelsea?
I did.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that being said, don't disagree. So,
I mean, if
that-
you, Madam Chair, if you want
Yes.
to, I'm trying to find a middle ground on this because
let's just move on, Mark. How's
I
that for
agree
middle
with
ground?
Mr. But so if you want to give a caveat that, if the answer is, okay, all right, never mind.
Move on. I think we're ready to move on. So that basically takes care of the budget. So now that takes us down to board positions on annual town meeting warrant articles.
Sorry,
So-
Lisa, can we
vote?
actually vote the budgets though?
The individual budgets,
Well, I don't want to vote on Board of Health here.
So we vote
Okay.
on all the others and then.
yeah, we can just vote on all the others. We'll do Board of Health separate.
Yeah.
Sam, are you making a motion?
I am.
Oh,
So-
wonderful. Go right ahead.
is what you have in mind, you're just going to list every single one except the ones that we talked about where we made a couple little changes. Have
As
one
we
kind
can do them as amended, Andrew. And basically it's just
Okay.
MTC. We're flipping to IT and EDC, we're deducting 1,000. Other than that, we're in support on everything else.
I so move.
Here we go. How easy was that? Is there a
Second.
second? All right. Roll call, Mr. Stivers,
Aye.
Mr. Dennington,
Aye.
Ms. Malinowski,
Aye.
Mr. Healy,
Aye.
Ms. Braccio, aye. That brings us to our second motion, Mr. Stivers, on Board of Health.
Board of Health, as proposed, move that we support.
Is there a second? Thank you. Roll call, Mr. Stivers,
Aye.
Mr. Dennington,
Aye.
Ms. Malinowski,
Abstain.
abstain. Okay, Mr. Healy
Aye.
and Ms. Braccio, aye. Okay, perfect, Mark. So that
Thank you.
takes care of Article 10. We have Article 9, adjustments to the water budget. We didn't take a position on that, Mark? Correct?
Yes, you're correct.
Okay, we discussed it. We just didn't take a position on it.
All the numbers, only the capital numbers were in there last time, I think. That's why we didn't take a position. Now all the numbers are
Correct.
in there.
Okay, is everyone good with taking a position on that tonight? Okay, do we
I
have a
move that we
motion?
support.
Thank you.
Second.
Thank you. Roll call, Mr. Stivers,
Aye.
Mr. Dennington,
Aye.
Ms. Malinowski,
Aye.
Mr. Healy,
Aye.
Ms. Braccio, aye. Thank you. That leads us down to the Article 11 fiscal year 23 water enterprise budget. Do we have a motion to support
Why
Article
didn't
11?
we support this previously?
I'm actually not sure on that, Sam.
Did we just include it in the same consideration as 10 and so didn't vote on it? Because I don't see.
Maybe. I don't either. I don't know why we didn't. I know we talked about it, but we didn't take a position on it.
Well, it's proposed by us, so we probably should support it.
Yeah, that's a good idea. Okay,
Wait a minute,
so
hold on.
really, let's not. Okay, so, all right. So, Mr. Stivers, are you making a motion to support Article 11?
So move.
Second.
Thank you. Mr. Stivers,
Aye.
Mr. Dennington,
Aye.
Ms. Malinowski,
Aye.
Mr. Healy,
Aye.
Ms. Braccio, aye. Thank you. So the board, obviously the CPC article for administrative, Burnett House and Library, those are standard. I know we didn't have a whole lot of discussion on the tennis courts, but it was discussed. Capital had a general discussion and we shared some information on it. It's pickleball.
Yep.
Pickleball's the thing, I guess, these days. So we can, I guess we'll just vote them. Mark, is all the updated? I should have looked at this first. Is all the CPC?
Yes.
It's updated.
All the
Okay.
language is updated in there now. Also, and you had skipped over it, Lisa, because you started with the financials, but the SAP any changes to personnel board, the bylaws in there. I will say they're minor in nature, but I'm not prepared to go through them all tonight, or any of the minor tweaks. So
Do we have a summary document on what's changed?
You likely
saw
will
one.
have that, but I don't have that. I don't have that now.
Okay, we haven't gotten it yet though, right?
Correct.
No.
Correct.
Okay.
Okay,
So-
I did actually, personnel board minutes. There was one. Yeah.
Okay.
Summary document.
So we can either take a position tonight or just take the position on the 12th. Chelsea, are you comfortable with putting it to the 12th?
Yeah, yeah,
Okay,
I'm good with the
Yeah.
12th, yeah.
I'm good with the 12th too. Okay. So, CPA administrative. Do we have a motion to support Article 22? Is it still 22, Mark? I know
Yes,
that
it is.
some things came
Yes.
up. Okay, thank you.
Yes.
So
Article
moved.
22, thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Stivers,
Aye.
Mr. Dennington,
Aye.
Ms. Malinowski.
Aye.
Mr. Healy,
Aye.
Ms. Braccio, aye. That leads us to the Burnett House. Do we have a motion to support Article 23?
So move.
Thank you.
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Stivers,
Aye.
Mr. Dennington,
Aye.
Ms. Malinowski,
Aye.
Mr. Healy.
Aye.
I should have just put these all together. Sorry. Article 24. Do we have a motion to support Article 24, library facade bond?
So move.
Thank you. Mr. Healy,
Second.
do we have a, thank you. Mr. Stivers,
My mind wandered.
Mr. Dennington,
Aye.
Ms. Malinowski,
Aye.
Mr. Healy,
Aye.
Ms. Brascio, aye. Next up is the tennis courts project, pickleball and resurfacing. Is the board willing to take a position on this tonight? I am.
Yes.
Okay, fair enough. Do we have a motion to support Article 25, CPA Finn Tennis Court Project?
So move.
Thank you.
Second.
Thank you. Mr. Stivers,
Aye.
Mr. Dennington,
Aye.
Ms. Malinowski,
Aye.
Mr. Healy,
Aye.
Ms. Brascio. Aye, sorry, I'm just looking at the screen. Okay, we took care of trails already. That leads us down to, oops, you know what? I skipped over a couple. Noise. I think there's still changes being made.
Really?
I'm not,
Wow.
I think they're done.
Yeah, I think.
are they
so.
done? All right, I'll be honest, I haven't read through the final, so if we could just table that one till the 12th and take a position on the 12th. I'd just like to read through it again. I did receive a phone call on this as well.
Lisa, well, I thought, yeah, Mr. Mello I thought his hand was up.
Oh, okay, hold on one second. Did I? It is.
It is
Can we
back
bring
up.
him over?
Yep.
I just want to add that I did receive a phone call yesterday from somebody that was concerned. I directed them as well to the noise bylaw committee that lives in a neighborhood. There's multiple houses in the neighborhood. There were landscapers there. She was beside herself from 8:30 in the morning till 4:30 in the afternoon when she called me. And there were blowers going all day. She was kind of beside herself. So I said I would share that with the board that, and she was also going to reach out to the noise bylaw committee.
I think
Good
she
evening,
made
Mr.
her
Mello. I'm
Good
sorry,
evening.
Sam.
I think she made her point at the noise bylaw committee meeting, as a matter of fact.
She did. Okay, fair enough.
She did, and I just
Okay.
we did submit the draft that we need your feedback on. That's the only reason I'm listening in and so forth and supporting the process in our town.
Okay, so noise, again, I haven't read through the final draft. So if the board will indulge me till the 12th to take a position on that, I'm sure it's fine. I just haven't had the opportunity to read through it all.
That's fine.
I will
We're
just say, I would take out, what article number is it? So I can pull it up real quick.
It is Article, Mark, did it change to 27? Because 27
It's
was
27.
removed. So it's now 27. I think maybe Marty in the warrant you have.
Yeah,
Depending
no,
on
I
which
found
one.
it. I found it. It's 27.
Okay,
I'm completely in support of the noise bylaw, sections 1 through 8. I will vote against it if section 9 is in there. That is insanity. It's absolute insanity to be stubborn about including something in the bylaw that doesn't need to be there because it's already state law. And it creates complications. If the state law changes, does that mean that we have a bylaw that's different than the state law? It's just crazy to include that in the bylaw. I don't understand the stubbornness for keeping it in.
Well, Marty, thank you for your feedback. It's about educating. We're not changing anything. We're not adding anything. It's just about educating our citizens to help them have a single point of view of where to get information related to noise bylaws. So we understand your feedback.
But that's not the reason for a bylaw. It's not. It's just not. And
We understand.
so
that.
okay, all right.
has council given his opinion on
Yeah,
that?
the only thing I will add is that council agreed with Mr. Healy and didn't agree that something like this belongs in a bylaw. So.
Okay. Okay, so does anyone have anything they'd like to add regarding that section as well? I somewhat agree, Marty. I mean, I don't know anywhere in the bylaw that we dictate where you can go to find information in any other zoning piece. Not zoning, but bylaw in general. So, Mr. Stivers, do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, I can live with it either way. I'm not so bothered by it being in there, frankly, but if it's important to get support for it, I think we could live without it.
Mr. Dennington?
Yeah, I'm not, I would not hold up voting for it. just because section 9 is in there.
Ms. Malinowski.
So we did discuss this at the Board of Health meeting. And the question, I believe, was, do we want to include more than this throughout the document? And the Board of Health's position was that we wanted to create our own rules and regs, that because there is more regulation around what the Board of Health is allowed to do. So that's where the Board of Health left it. And I'm happy to add, the Board of Health is meeting next Tuesday morning. And I am happy to bring this up with the Board of Health on Tuesday to revisit the discussion and kind of get consensus around what direction is. Go ahead, Marty. Go ahead, Marty.
What Chelsea just suggested does two things. Number one, it makes perfect sense, but it also shows you why it shouldn't be in a bylaw. Because then if you have the Board of Health doing something more expansive, do you include or not include this? We now have it in two provisions. I mean, things belong in bylaws that belong in bylaws. And throwing in additional clutter, I'm not surprised Mr. Chalaman agrees with me or vice versa. It's just not how you do bylaws.
Okay, so we'll table this to the 12th. Mr. Mello, is the Noise Bylaw Committee, when is their next meeting?
We love to meet on a regular basis, so next Thursday.
I know. I was hoping as we get closer to town meeting, you were going to say, we're actually taking a break. So
no, we were hoping to get some feedback so we can actually start the marketing and the presentations and so forth. So that's why your feedback is very important to us, so that we could be aligned with your goals and so forth.
Okay, and what I'll do is, so we'll take a position on the 12th. What I'll do, Mr. Mello, is obviously I asked to hold this so I could just review it one final time. If I have any other thoughts other than section 9, I will send them to your chair well in advance of your meeting.
Please call me John. Like, you sound like my father. I'm old.
All right, John, thank you. Yes, if you could take the feedback of the concern on section 9 and any others I have, which I'm not sure that there'll be any, but I just want to take the extra time to just review it.
Okay, thank you for your
That would be
feedback.
great. And thank you for sticking around till 10 o'clock. We always appreciate.
Oh, this is early for our bylaw. It usually goes beyond this.
All right, wonderful. Thank you. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
All right, so we'll take that one off. Trees, scenic roads. I think those are probably not going to be something we're going to take positions on. I still have some questions. Go ahead, Marty.
Lisa, I know you've had some conversations with some folks on the planning board about this. I mean, I will tell you that again, I was gone for a week or so I didn't get a chance to look at the packet until this afternoon. And just conservatively, there were probably 12 to 15 things that from a legal standpoint are problematic. There are definitions that float. There's a reference to, unless it's changed, there's a reference to a tree fund in Article 29 that doesn't exist. I mean, there's just, it is, Andrew's proposed bylaw that requires boards and committees to go through a process is there because just even regulations have the force of law, but certainly a bylaw has the force of law. And this bylaw, it gives a tree warden, an individual, not a board or committee, not anyone who's elected, in my view, extraordinary power. Power that I'm not comfortable delegating to an individual, again, who's not elected. And I just, between now and a special town meeting in October or November, when there'd be ample time to get this right, as opposed to rushing ahead and proposing something to the town that has the force of law, that has penalties in it. And again, in my mind, I spent a couple of hours with it And I found conservatively 12 or 15 things that from a legal standpoint are problematic. I just, the idea that we're flowing down a channel here to get this done by May 4th or 5th makes absolutely no sense to me.
So Marty, what we can do is we can not take a position. This can be an at-town meeting, and we'll invite planning board to come in and have some of these discussions and share. Andrew,
Sorry about that. Sorry.
No, that's okay. Is there something you want to add? It's fine. I'm just suggesting
Okay.
that we.
It's so I take it that the planning board is dead set. They are going forward with these, not gonna do them at the special fall.
They voted to do that the other night. Yeah.
Okay.
To move forward. But I think, I think there's, and again, I can't speak for planning board, but I think there's some level of concern on guaranteeing that there will be a fall town meeting. There's been no, a commitment. I think planning board feels they're ready to move forward. And again, if I'm speaking out of turn for them, I apologize. But I think they feel they're ready. There's public hearings. They've already, I think they held one on the 28th, I want to say. So I know they're going before advisory as well. So, advisories at I believe at an at-town meeting, because they haven't had time to discuss this either. I mean, we can certainly have a conversation, but I think they would be looking from some level of commitment that there is a fall town meeting. I mean, they think it's ready. So I think we leave this at town meeting and we try to invite them. Or we, obviously participate when they go before advisory as well. So we don't set up a special meeting potentially. I don't know if they'll be available the 12th to come and discuss this.
So I think there's benefit though in having the select board's recommendation published in the warrant. I think it does send kind of a different signal at town meeting versus taking a vote on. I mean, my vote on both of them right now would be no. And on, I think that article, the two of them kind of go together in right. When I first saw Article 29, I just saw the list and I kind of thought, oh, is that like reducing the list of, no, that's significantly expanding the scope of scenic roads. And I just have my problem is if I don't like the concept of having every single road in the town be a scenic road. It seems to undermine the whole idea of having, I mean, I was just looking at some other towns' bylaws today where they have criteria that you meet for a road to be designated as a scenic road based on its proximity to, stone walls and things like that. This seems to be the policy is we want as many roads as possible to be scenic roads, and I just don't agree with that. And it seems like, I mean, one thing that's significant here is that where planning board sponsors a zoning article, if it gets voted down, right, usually there's a 2-year rule, it can't come back, but the planning board can, if they make a recommendation to bring it back, then they can do that. And since they're the ones sponsoring it, even if it actually, if there was a debate at town meeting about it and it failed, they could just tweak it and come back at a fall town meeting.
But this isn't a zoning article, is it?
Oh, I guess you're right.
No.
So then forget that comment. Then there's no restriction. They could bring it back anytime.
Mm-hmm.
Has the feel of zoning. It's a land use article, but not, you're right, a zoning article.
Technically not, yeah.
My only concern with taking a position tonight on this is we haven't spoken to planning board. We haven't shared our concerns with the article with them. I mean, we can certainly ask, on the 12th. Go ahead, Marty.
Yeah, I agree with you, Lisa. I'm just curious, Mark, do you know, has Jay Tallerman looked at this?
I know that he's been having some back and forth with planning on this and that, but I'm not privy to all of the the comments and the back and forth on it.
Okay, I mean, I'd be really surprised if town council has signed off on the language.
I think the only thing that I can comment on specifically is I think at the end of the tree bylaw, I think Mr. Dennington mentioned about the tree fund. Mr. Healy. So there is no tree fund, and they're trying to push into the end of the article. Okay, well, we're going to go in and amend this other bylaw and do this and change this and do those things. And council has said you can't do that. So that's the only piece, that's the only specific piece that I could speak to.
Okay.
So, I mean, we can certainly, I'll find out from advisory when they're planning on having them come in to discuss the article. Again, Mr. Purple can certainly pull the board. We can try to see if they're available on the 12th. But I think these are some level of lengthy discussions as well. So it's certainly up to the board's will, what they prefer to do.
I'm generally in support of this. On the other hand, I think that if there are concerns where others are not going to be able to support it, I think it's worth talking some more about it and finding ways to potentially make modifications. And again, there's always an opportunity to indefinitely postpone. I think it ought to stay on the warrant, but people can take a harder look at it later then in the fall if we do that. So I think it's worth having the conversations with advisory and with the planning board to clarify some of these things.
Okay. So what I'll do is we'll send out a note. We'll see availability. We'll also check with advisory when advisory is going to discuss it. Maybe we just piggyback on that discussion with them, just specifically to the trees and the scenic roads. So Mr. Purple will pull the board once I get information on either the 12th or when advisory's going to discuss it. If that's amenable to everyone. Okay, that takes us to trails. Mr. Dennington's adoption of rules and regulations. Do we have a motion to support article? It's now 31, correct, Mark? Okay, thank you.
So move.
Okay, is there a second? Thank you. Roll call, Mr. Stivers.
Aye.
Mr. Dennington.
Aye.
Ms. Malinowski. Thank you, Mr. Healy.
Aye.
Ms. Braccio. Aye. That takes us down to the citizens petitions, which we haven't had an opportunity to discuss, so I'm not ready to take up it. Go
Are
ahead,
there two
Andrew.
more? The Capital Improvement Planning Committee.
Oh, thank you. I
32,
skipped over that
32.
one. How bad is that? It's now, yes, 32. Do we have a motion to support Article 32? The
So moved.
capital, thank you. Second,
Second.
thank you. Mr. Stivers,
Aye.
Mr. Dennington,
Aye.
Ms. Malinowski,
Aye.
Mr. Healy,
Aye.
and Ms. Braccio. Aye. Thank you very much. Mark, did we didn't take a position on the stabilization fund. I know.
You did not, and I just sent something out late this afternoon. I apologize again because, you know, these things are changing very quickly, but the information just came in this afternoon. There were some issues with the article. It has changed several times, but town council had opined, and then the schools council and regional school committee chair opined that the article that was passed in 2018 by the town of Northborough, this needs to match that. And so the language that was sent out to you late this afternoon is the same exact language that was passed in Northborough in 2018. Some of the things that were in the previous version of the article that put up, I guess, what you may call fences on how it can be used and everything in that would be things that would be taken up in policy form by the regional school committee rather than having those in the article.
Okay. Anyone have, go ahead, Chelsea.
Mark, do you know if they're intending on drafting a financial policy prior to town meeting?
I don't know that.
That'd be helpful to me.
I can ask the question.
Can we find out before the 12th? And we'll leave this one to the 12th.
Sure.
Okay, I think it'll be just a quick vote. Okay, so then that leaves citizens petitions. So I don't believe advisories even had, well, they haven't had anybody come in yet. So if the board's ready, we can take positions on these, but I'm certainly not ready to at this
I'd
point.
like to hear people explain
I agree, Sam.
questions.
Okay. Is everyone else good with that? So tentatively, those will be an at-town meeting. Okay. Okay. So, Mr. Purple, is that helpful to you?
So
As far as the warrant?
actually, is there a vote for at town meeting, or am I listing those at town meeting, or straw
Yeah.
poll?
Straw
I'm happy to
poll.
move
Yeah, go ahead, Sam.
meeting for the citizen petitions.
Yeah. Is there a second?
I didn't hear what the motion was, Sam.
I move our position is at town meeting for the citizen petitions.
I'll second that.
Okay. Mr. Stivers,
Aye.
Mr. Dennington,
Aye.
Ms. Malinowski, Mr. Healy,
Aye.
and Ms. Brascio, aye. And if we meet before town meeting, Mark, let me ask you this question. When it goes up on the screen at town meeting, if we take a position prior to town meeting or even before town meeting starts, will our position then show on the screen? It may not be in the warrant, but will be on the screen, correct?
Yes, we've changed those on the fly, so we can do
Okay.
that.
Okay, I just want to make sure that whatever we vote, it's viewable to the public. Okay, that takes us through the warrant articles. Just a quick C and D should be relatively quick. The governor has extended the outdoor dining through April of 23. So far, we've had one application looking to do this. Basically, the only question into the board is at this point, is the board willing to entertain? There's no fees or anything set up for this. I personally think with COVID and everything else, to charge a fee to do the outdoor dining is, we waived it. We waived any fees last year. So I guess my question is the board willing to waive an outdoor dining fee, which we don't have set up anyway, for the one application or potentially two?
I actually would move that the current policy of the board is that we not charge fees for any dining establishment that wants to establish outdoor dining. I think it's a good thing. I don't think we should discourage it.
I agree.
I do too, but
So that's my motion.
Perfect.
Second.
Thank you. Discussion?
Lisa, one question
Yes.
about the policy here. Is the language about requiring 6-foot separation per Board of Health, is that still in effect for outdoor dining? That's in this policy, in the application. So we might, if it's not,
Yeah,
it's still in effect, update the
Yeah,
policy.
take it out.
Yeah, and in the policy or in the documents, the point number 5 about the governor's order of 2020 was highlighted. I don't know whether that's still in effect or not. There's something that changes April 1st relative to the governor's stuff.
Yeah, so we had tried to sanitize that. We'll take another run through and make sure that all of those items have been removed.
So update the policy as per this conversation and governor's requirements, et cetera.
No pun intended, Mark. You're going to sanitize the document.
Well, no one else picked up on it, but I appreciate you.
It's late. It's late.
But to that same point, right, that Roman numeral 6 and 7 about requiring the applicants have a COVID safety protocol plan and affidavit. Do we still need all that?
No.
Okay.
So like I said, we had a COVID checklist on the back and everything that had to be done during this inspection and everything in that. So we've taken that out. So we'll take another run through. I think the important point tonight was whether the board wanted to change on charging a fee or not. So.
Nope.
Okay.
And Mark, can we just make sure that we communicate with the health department for anybody that's doing outdoor dining, just from an occupancy perspective? I just want to make sure that they are aware.
Oh,
Thank you.
absolutely. No, we'll make sure, even though there's not a COVID piece, we'll make sure they're involved.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Okay. No further discussion. Mr. Stivers.
You need a motion to,
Already
Marty
moved.
made a motion and then you
did.
you amended the motion.
You seconded my motion.
You did, and you amended it at the same time. So with the sanitized version. So I think we're good.
okay, aye.
Okay, Mr. Dennington.
I'm actually a little confused, but we're getting that. I thought that basically Mark was gonna, we're not requiring a fee, and then Mark is gonna revise this document. There's gonna be taking a lot of stuff out. Then why don't we just wait until the next meeting to look at the revised version before? Or is it the idea that this?
Do it now?
I thought we were just going to leave that administrative function to Mark.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm fine with that. Good. So then I was not understanding what the current motion on the under consideration is then.
Okay.
Or
So
we
you
just
would-
moved off of this topic and we're done with it.
I will restate my motion.
Okay.
I vote that we adopt as a policy to support outdoor dining by dining establishments in Southborough, and that the town of Southborough will not be charging a fee for any dining establishment that chooses to do that.
And that the policies be updated as we discussed this evening?
Sure.
Yeah.
Okay.
As amended, Mr. Stivers.
Second, as amended.
Okay. Discussion. Hopefully none. Okay, Mr. Stivers,
Aye.
Mr. Dennington,
Aye.
Ms. Malinowski,
Aye.
Mr. Healy,
Aye.
Ms. Brascio, aye. Thank you. Next up, just an update on the tree warden and the tree hearing for Flag and Deerfoot. The DPW and the tree warden have filed an application for the Deerfoot Flag intersection. There's a tentative public hearing scheduled for the removal of the 2 trees on 425 with planning board. That's being posted in the paper now. So that is just an update to the board that's taking place. And then I had submitted to the board a very simple process, just in the interim as we move forward regarding scenic roads and non-scenic roads. And the only real changes we made, I work with Mimi on this, so she's bringing it to planning board. The only real difference from what's required by the law now is Karen has agreed that if there's a hearing under chapter 87, that they would come to a Board of Selectmen meeting and hold the hearing in the interim. So that's really the only change. This is just to make the process a little quicker. This doesn't deal with drip lines or, a lot of the things that's in the tree policy, but this is not policy, the tree bylaw. But this is just in the interim. Basically, if there's a hearing, it's going to go through on a scenic road, it's going to be a joint hearing. And if it's on a non-scenic road, there's going to be the normal tree warden hearing, but it's going to be done at a Board of Selectmen meeting for additional transparency.
Yeah. My concern is that we do have the hearings, and I think this actually accomplishes that. So.
Yep. So we tried to make it something small that encompassed everything that's required by chapter 87 and chapter 40 into some very basic steps just for the interim.
Yep.
Okay. So if the board is in support
Marty has a
of
question.
Lisa,
sorry.
just very quickly,
Yes.
all I want to make sure is that this doesn't, and it's one of my concerns with some of the language in the articles as well.
Yeah.
That this doesn't restrict in any way the ability to take down something that is hazardous.
It does not, as we found out today, with the email that came over that, that's already scheduled. This doesn't hinder that in any way, Marty.
Okay.
And Karen has looked at this as well. So
Okay.
Mimi will take it to planning board. Karen has given it her blessing as well. We're all clear that, basically, again, the only change is that we would do a chapter 87 hearing at a Board of Selectmen meeting if the need arises, other than a hazard tree.
So Lisa, is it a policy, or do you just want us to adopt this as the
It's
process
A
going?
process, as an interim process.
Okay, I
As an interim
move
process.
that we endorse what did you call it? The tree flow
The
chart as a
tree flow
revised
chart.
process going forward until further change.
Yeah.
Second.
Thank you. Any further discussion? Okay, Mr. Stivers,
Aye.
Mr. Dennington,
Aye.
Ms. Malinowski,
Aye.
Mr. Healy,
Aye.
Ms. Brascio, aye. Thank you. And like I said, Mimi's going to take it to planning board as well. So I don't foresee any issues. That takes us to our final public comment. Thank you, everybody, for hanging around. If anybody would like to share, we would welcome. Just please raise your hand. Okay. Mr. Litt, it's always a pleasure to see you. So before we go to adjournment, we are going to actually enter into, do I have a motion to enter into executive session for MGL Chapter 38, Section 21, and not returning to open session to 1, discuss contract negotiations for DPW Superintendent, Exemption 2, 2, to discuss ongoing personnel matter, Exemption 1, and 3, to discuss Park Central litigation, Exemption 3, as the chair has determined that an open meeting may have a detrimental effect on the town's position.
So move.
Second.
Thank you. Roll call. Mr. Stivers.
Aye.
Mr. Dennington.
Aye.
Ms. Malinowski.
Aye.
Mr. Healy.
Aye.
Ms. Braccio, aye. Thank you. Thank you, everyone, for attending. We will be entering into executive session. If everyone could sign out, except the board, obviously. If all of our attendees